little mic. I'll give you the
I'm just so tired of it. I've done it for 3 years.
Okay. Call the meeting to order. Ask council if there's any additions to the agenda. None. Give me one. It's there already. Any other than the ones that we've already recorded? Seeing none. Madam Clerk.
Your Worship. First item are minutes of the council committee meeting held Monday, November 25th. The recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Rod, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
The second item is a delegation from Mr. Glenn Toppings of the Hazel Drive Neighbours Association regarding the citywide OCP amendment application for the Hazel Drive area. I'll ask Mr. Toppings.
Yeah, the staff report on this too. I don't have a. Chief, have you got enough notes? No, it's not. You're going to talk in short, 4-word sentences. 2 of them. That's all you and Brent are allowed.
Short 4-word sentence.
You laid down the law.
And that's for these 2. 2. I hardly speak.
Okay, I'll just admonish the person who hardly ever speaks to not speak. Okay. Good day, sir.
Good day.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is Ed Wamsley, one of the members of the Hazel Drive Neighbours Association. This is Bill Ward. I'm Glenn Toppings. I'm one of the owners of the 3331 Hazel property. We purchased the property 24 years ago. When we approached the city for an OCP amendment in 1997, we were told the amendment would have to involve the whole neighbourhood. We canvassed our neighbours and formed the Hazel Drive Neighbours Association. As the largest property in the neighbourhood, we have taken the lead through the years. One of our investor owners, John Minicello, a retired school principal who had experience with public speaking, has spoken for the neighbourhood in the past. John has had a series of small strokes and moved on and sold his interest in the property. I have inherited his job. I will try to express the Hazel Drive Neighbours position as best I can. I'm a 40-year realtor in Coquitlam and own the equivalent of 2 acres involved in the Hazel Drive neighbourhood. We want to thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. There are only 34 properties in the Hazel Drive neighbourhood. It involves about 139 acres. Very few of these 34 properties are vacant. 25 of the 34 properties are occupied by the families that own them. 31 of the 34 properties are under 5 acres. 20 of the 34 lots are under 2 acres. We're a small area of small properties. It is important to understand that we speak with one mind here. A door-to-door survey was conducted by the Hazel Drive members in July this year. The area is overwhelmingly opposed to their involvement in the visioning process. I speak for 96% of the owners. Only one property owner is opposed to the application for the OCP amendment. This one property owner also opposes the Hazel Drive area being involved in a scope and visioning process. We were unable to contact 3 owners. The other properties being proposed to be involved with us in the scope and visioning process are large, unoccupied, vacant tracts of land held by developer owners and the provincial government. And you can see on map 1, Hazel's designated there. The area is the slanted lines there. The purple areas are all the development reserve properties that haven't been looked at that are going to be included in the visioning process, we understand. And there's a huge difference here, and here's the huge difference. It is a difference that planning really shouldn't be involved in. Their responsibility isn't to these 25 families that live in the Hazel area. Their job is to present planning models that are efficient and visionary for the city. When we met with planning and appealed for our area's exclusion and the injustice that has occurred over time, they correctly argued we needed council support to direct them. So here we are before you today. There is no greater argument to appeal for political support than the situation of our older residents, who are longtime Burke Mountain residents. I'm talking about the Wards, the Opposite Mullins, the Foxes, the Spurlings, the Fankponers, the Wamsleys, and many others. Some of these families are as close as anyone can find to Burke Mountain pioneers. Take, for example, the Ward family. Bill and Eleanor built a house in the very rural and isolated setting that was Hazel Drive in 1966. Coquitlam Centre was a field, still more than a decade away from construction. City Hall was in Millardville, 17 kilometers away. They set about raising their family. They lived in Coquitlam but had to drive through Port Coquitlam every day to get home. Their kids went to schools in Port Coquitlam. Their services like police came from Port Coquitlam. Their rural mailing addresses were Port Coquitlam. There were those that said they should formally just be in Poco. Eleanor Ward thought otherwise. The ratepayers reformed, and Eleanor lobbied to get city services to Burke Mountain and connect Burke Mountain with the rest of the city. She thought the city should provide services to Burke Mountain. There was hardly a council meeting that she did not attend. She was outspoken, and she held council's feet to the fire. She was Burke Mountain's advocate and champion. It took time from her family, who never enjoyed the services and connections she fought for. She was an unpaid volunteer who carefully avoided bias to her own Hazel Drive neighborhood. When we originally formed the Hazel Drive Neighborhood Association, the wards abstained from membership. In August 2007, talking about the Northeast Coquitlam Area Plan, in a Vancouver Sun article, Eleanor said she supported the upcoming NECAP because it will clear the way for many small landowners, particularly seniors, to realize some profits as their property is rezoned. As well, development will bring long-course city civic amenities like a sewage trunk line, community centers, and a fire hall to the underserviced area. When the North Coquitlam Area Plan finally passed, in Eleanor's opinion, she had failed small property owners with NECAP. She thought that it opened development for big developers at the expense of small property owners. The city argued NECAP would organize development, allowing the city to conduct neighborhood area plans and get the development that would pay for services to places such as Hazel. The first 3 NEPs under NECAP were done in less than 3 years, front-ended and directed by its major property owner, a large developer. The only NEP done by the city itself at their expense was expected to be completed in 2008. It took about 8 years. The city recognized Eleanor's tireless volunteer advocacy for Burke Mountain by naming the bridge connecting Burke Mountain to the rest of Coquitlam after her, in memoriam. Today, Bill Ward lives alone in his home at 3337 Hazel. He drives over the bridge, named after his wife, up Coast Meridian, past the construction, the new development signs, the new homes and new families, enjoying Burke Mountain and its modern amenities and services. Many of the developers and new families weren't born when he and Eleanor moved there. Those that were may not have known Burke Mountain even existed. The Ward House is almost 50 years old. The neighborhood still hasn't changed much. Wells for water and septic fields are regularly failing. Some of his old pioneer neighbors have passed on, or sold and moved out. Others are in failing health. We are absolutely opposed to folding the promised Hazel Drive neighborhood area plan into the visioning process. Many of our residents will never see services in their neighborhood and the resolution of their family legacies. You may ask, how can an OCP amendment application be open and unresolved for over 16 years? I'm not going to dwell here. I don't have time on the history. We are only concerned now with moving forward. It is enough to say that our application has always been supported by councils over the years, and we have been deferred twice at planning's urging. In 2007, we finally went to council again to advance our application. Planning wouldn't support anything less than a full NAP. And at the urging of planning, we agreed to defer our OCP amendment once again and allow a full city-funded NAP for the Hazel area, provided it start in 2008. The motion that council direct staff to undertake a neighborhood plan for the Hazel Drive area as soon as possible in 2008, and include application 97112-976RZ for CWOCP amendment in the Hazel Drive area in the process, and that the city will explore as part of the Hazel Drive neighborhood plan process a range of land use, higher density residential densities, and site planning options beyond those envisioned in NECAP, and which recognizes the multiple property owner and residential interests and objectives within the area. With NECAP, our area had moved from the logical extension in 1997 of the Oxford subdivision, and the only area that could be serviced and developed on Burke Mountain at the time, to Phase 3. Today, we are proposed to be folded into Phase 5, with properties that were not even part of the phasing projections in NECAP. We are a small area isolated from the rest of the properties proposed for visioning and the neighborhood plan to follow. These other properties proposed for visioning are largely uninhabited, have virtually no road access, have no access to services such as water and sewer, have little environmental study and very limited geotechnical studies. In addition, there will be extensive consultation required with the provincial government and First Nations. There will be public consultation involving the Coquitlam River, the Oxford Extension, gravel operations, and other issues. There will be complications. Hyde Creek and the topography almost completely separates the Hazel neighborhood from these properties. Visioning will apparently take until 2015. If this timeline is met, phased neighborhood plans will begin. The last neighborhood plan took 8 years. That takes us to 2021. Will these properties be easier and quicker than Partington? Not likely. Much of the planning in our area has been resolved and dealt with. We are already designated on NECAP as residential. We have previously done environmental studies, have residents waiting for services, have established an established road pattern, designated on NECAP. The water reservoir and pump station have now been built, and there are 2 viable identified service corridors. There has been traffic studies, stormwater management studies. We've recently done geotechnical slope analysis and assessments and surveys. The city has done an environmental assessment of ESAs in our neighborhood, and we have had those same environmental consultants back 3 more times recently. We have previously held formal public consultations and made a representation to the ratepayers. We are asking that our OCP amendment be advanced and that council support it and make it a priority. There is certainly work to be done before any rezoning and subdivision approvals. The city will not have to pay for this. Our neighborhood is even prepared to pay for the work to keep the process moving. Densities will not be an issue. We just want what the surrounding residents already have: services and the appropriate density that will pay for it. We have deferred our application twice at planning's urging. We waited more than 16 years. We just want council to honor the promise the city made 6 years ago. We were told to wait for Partington NEP. It was explained there wasn't money for the city to do a second concurrent NEP. We weren't a high enough priority. It's been very frustrating. We were not here coming to throw bricks or sensationalizing our plight publicly. We just want fairness. We have fallen through the cracks. We're coming to you, hat in hand, urgently needing to move forward as quickly as possible. We have waited our turn. As I said, we have met with the latest new community planners for Burke Mountain. They seem to be bright, creative, and well-intentioned. However, broadening the scope of the plan will only grind things to a halt in our neighborhood. Our neighborhoods simply don't have time for another visioning. In the past, we have talked to the mayor, who said it is up to council to establish their priorities. The longtime residents, such as the Ward family, should be a huge priority for this city. We need not only council's support, but we're asking council to advocate for us and find a speedy way through this long process. Please help us. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. I want to express, first of all, my apology. You had agreed to take 5 minutes, and I forgot to start the clock. My apologies.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill begins.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned a timeline about not expecting the visioning to end until sometime in 2015, and then years and years after that until you're in position that you want to be. Last month, my colleagues and I received a memo from somebody in the planning department that talked of comparing the visioning process to the TDS process that we implemented to speed up and facilitate our process in the areas where there's rapid transit. And my recollection, that took place rather quickly. Within a year, it was 5 months. 5 months. I would like to ask, on your behalf, somebody from the planning department to explain that how would this visioning process be similar to the TDS process? And I can show you the quote if you'd like to see it here. So can I ask through the chair, somebody from the planning department to say how a 5-month process from start to finish is similar to a visioning process. It's just the first leg of a long journey.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Worship. Good afternoon. I'll offer a couple of comments, and if Carl wants to jump in and finish off. First, the good news is we're just working on a report right
I think
now.
you're going to need a mic because we're being webcast.
Thank you for that, Terry.
First, the good news is that we're actually preparing a report that's going to council and committee a week today. I just was reviewing the draft this morning, and it'll lay out this proposed visioning process in more detail. To directly answer the question, it is comparable to the TDS visioning exercise in the sense that it's a high-level examination. Though I would suggest in this case, though, the scope is going to be greater. And as touched on by the delegation, there's a range of issues, whereas the TDS was more focused on the fact of the Evergreen transit line, the stations, and sort of focused development around that. We're hoping to make this visioning process as quick and efficient as possible, but I think we need to realize going into it there are a range of challenges. For these properties here, what we're anticipating is that through the visioning process, it'll identify sort of stages of areas, of planning areas. There may be lands out towards the outer fringe, like Gun Club, for example, that may be in that use for many, many years, but at least it's an opportunity to look at them holistically. The second group would identify lands that would benefit from a neighborhood planning process, and this is what we're finding, particularly as we've developed across Burke Mountain. To jump straight to rezoning and subdivision without doing some overall pre-planning can be very, very challenging and kind of disastrous. So it'll set the stage for identifying those areas where a neighborhood plan would be beneficial. It'll also, to my mind, identify lands that may have that opportunity for a more immediate proceed directly to OCP amendment application type status. And we've got a number of property owners that have been pressuring for that. They're right on the boundaries, or they have properties that are half in, say, the Smiling Creek neighborhood plan, half in outside that. So there may be lands that are tagged with more immediate OCP amendment potential.
Chair, hasn't the Hazel Harper area already been identified as certainly through council's previous motions and through everything that's as one of these areas that can be moved right to that?
The Hazel Harper area, really the last time it's been looked at in any detail was through the NECAP, Northeast Coquitlam Area Plan. That's the designations you see on the first colored map here. And much of the area is green. The pink-purple area, that's Development Reserve. The crosshatch area that's sort of at the center there, that's the neighborhood that the delegation is talking about. That's a suburban residential designation there. What they want to do is take that, which is like those 1 acre lots, they want to take that to 5 or more lots per acre. So it means changing that OCP designation to something that's more like yellow that you'd see down there in Upper Hyde Creek or Smiling Creek. So typically that's done through the benefit of a neighborhood plan.
So one last question. The same memo that we received said even if suggested that of these different types of long-term, short to medium-term, or near-term, even if Hazel Harper is identified by the visioning process as a near-term urban development ready for OCP amendment, that's still a 2 to 5 year process at that stage, according to this document. So we could be looking for the year plus of visioning plus 2 to 5 years on top of that, according to this document.
I'm confused on that point. No, it shouldn't require that. If you're proceeding directly to an OCP amendment, then there's a rezoning and a subdivision. I'll let Carl elaborate.
That was meant to capture, the Hazel Drive area may advance sooner than that, but that statement was meant to capture. There may be other areas in the Hazel Harper vision area that could proceed to OCP amendment. So that was just trying to capture. There may be multiple opportunities. So it was just a 2 to 5 year range for different applications.
So the very quickest it could be would be 2 years on top of the 1 year of visioning.
Again, it depends on, we want to get this vision complete by 2015, and as a part of that would be a phasing plan that would identify some lands that could be ready for OCP amendment. And then the applicant can also be working on their application during that time, and that may help to speed up the process, but there probably will be a little bit more time after the adoption of the vision in order to prepare that OCP amendment. But in this case, we're undertaking this TDS-like approach in order to accelerate the land use planning process for this area. And again, the idea is to have that high-level policy to guide future OCP amendments. So some areas may advance faster than others, and this area is closer to existing services and neighborhood plan boundaries, or adopted neighborhood plans that are under construction or under development, so that may help.
So was there a visioning process that preceded the TDS, or did we go right into that?
Yeah, maybe I can speak to that, since I was part of the push behind that TDS process. Before we did that visioning process, the typical approach here was the neighborhood plan process, and that all applicants were basically deferred until the full area plan would go forward, and those area plans typically took 3 to 5 years. Council appealed to me at one of our retreats that could do something to speed up the process, and that was in late January of just a year and a half ago. I took that away because we always try to achieve what council asks us to achieve within the limits of what is possible. Although we took that away, had a number of discussions with the planning department, and we came up with a different process, which is called a visioning process, which is designed by its very nature to be very high level, to be very quick, to make the key overview decisions in a very timely manner. I was very, very impressed with how we were able to do that. Council identified it in January, and we were able to finish it, including a couple of public meetings, including many council reports by July of that year. It required the staff of that area working many hours of overtime, waiving all sorts of procedural deadlines in order to do that. But it was a clear council priority. It was a huge need because evergreen land was coming that was changing the face of our community. Those same drivers are not here in this case. I certainly sympathize with long-serving family members that are patiently waiting, but the same drivers for urban change are not there. There are many other areas that serve the city's needs. They don't serve the owner's needs, but they serve the city's needs. So it really comes down to how many areas the cities you want to open up, how quickly. And that is a council decision. As Jim said, there will be a report that will be on your agenda next week, and at that time, when you see the maps and that kind of thing, if you want to give direction to the visioning process, including your expectations of interim steps along the way, interim priorities, if you want to, you'll have the full plan next week, and that would be an appropriate time to give any kind of council direction you want on that area. But as I've said over and over again, you can't do everything all at once. And there are choices, and I certainly sympathize for people who've been waiting for many, many years to that. And at the end of the day, council has to make difficult choices in terms of, do you want to separate this out or make this as one of the first priorities of the visioning process? I'm really proud of the visioning process because it basically cuts through all sorts of what I consider bureaucracy in terms of neighborhood planning, and I consider it a state-of-the-art process that many other municipalities should be following because it actually lets everybody know and gives council the opportunity to make decisions quickly on rough guidelines. Then you can fill in the details later. So that would be my comment.
Thank you.
Okay. Just 1 second. And to emphasize that, I mean, I'm really impressed by the way staff are able to respond to council's requests. Staff prove time and time again that they can do anything we ask them to almost immediately, but they can't do everything we ask them to almost immediately. So, Terry,
No, I'm finished, but I just want to try to find them their mic again.
yeah. So we'll
Jim's
Jim's got a comment, and then we'll grab the mic.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Worship. Got a frog in my throat here, so bear with me. Staff, too, are aware and sympathetic to the property owners. Ever since I started with the city almost 9 years ago, I've had meetings and conversations with these gentlemen. We recognized that there was a program, a planning program that was going from basically west to east across Burke Mountain, and that's the program we stuck to. Though earlier on, maybe some of the councillors aren't aware of this, when we initiated the Smiling Creek planning process, and I was just a new planning director at the time here, I said, well, you know, here's this group up in Hazel Harbour. Do you want to get on board with that? And there was no take-up by the property owners at that time. The developer proponent of the Smiling Creek neighborhood plan wasn't keen on it either, but there was an opening there to include them. I think actually in hindsight it's probably best if it isn't, because it would have stretched things out and complicated it. I am aware, staff is aware, and this is why the Hazel Harbour has been on our work program. We keep raising this, we keep bringing it to council's attention. It's now finally moved to a point on our work program that we can move ahead with it. And that's why we're bringing the report forward next week. And some of the feedback we get from council is staff focus in on how this area can be looked at more closely, more quickly. Are there ways of facilitating? That's the sort of direction we would welcome from council, and that gives us something to work on where we can come back with a more detailed work program along that.
Okay, and the microphone back.
On?
Microphone's on, but it doesn't broadcast. It's meant only to go.
Oh, well, that's not good.
I have
It goes to
a
the
few
back.
comments to that. If you know, people could refer to the map number 2. This is a phasing urban development pattern that was put out when NECAP came in 2002. This was put out 5 years, and after we'd been deferred, and we're a little bit cynical about visioning because we were deferred for visioning at that time. And after visioning, NECAP, we were phase 3. So you can see on the map phase 3, this is where Hazel is. Actually, where phase 3 has been taken out of the Hazel. It was clawed out as part of Upper Hyde Creek. Phase 1 and phase 2 were done by a large developer with lands in those areas. The area that was clawed out of Hazel Drive also had large hunks of land that were cheap to buy and they could develop. What's left with us today is that area above the green line, above Hyde Creek for the most part. And you can see all the smaller properties that are in there. It's surrounded, you can see with the green line, to the west and the north by the escarpment. It's isolated on the east side by Hyde Creek. We have no connection to the rest of the visioning properties. There's no services that are going to feed our properties and their properties. There's no roads that are going to feed our properties and their properties other than Coast Meridian. We've already had all kinds of studies and visioning, and I'm sorry we're cynical. The city has never met the timeline. When NECAP was put in, I think it was maybe Councillor Reid that made the motion to defer us so that they could do the visioning and set the pattern, set the table for the whole of the mountain for development. At that time, we were the only place on Burt Mountain that could feasibly be serviced. We thought we were number one. That's why the city told us to go in for an OCP amendment. That's what they recommended at the time. Now we were faced with neighborhood plans, and we were phase 3. Phase 3 has been clawed. It's been clawed out. All the big hunks have been taken out by the developer. What we're left with now is a problem for the city. It's a small area of small properties. It's been largely studied. It doesn't need visioning. It's been visioned twice. We need your support and advocacy to move this ahead quickly. We will never see what Eleanor Ward wanted to see in front of her property. She's the last group of properties on Burke Mountain without services, without a neighborhood area plan, without an OCP amendment, without anything in front of her property. We have wells. We have septics. We have limited street lighting. We have limited services. We have only one way to get to Hazel Drive. It's time. Yes, it's time. We need your help. This is a creative planning department. They'll find a way. This has to be done quickly.
Thank you. We're doing our very best up in Burke Mountain to create a really amazing community.
Yeah.
Those things do take time, and I recognize that time has been something that you keep getting put off to some degree because
we keep standing in line and they keep moving the line.
Well, in large, I mean, I get up there about once a month, and I'll tell you that as someone who used to do some work in housing, that is one of the most challenging neighborhoods as well. But I accept that we keep putting it off, and let's find out what we can do about this. I got Councillor Socorro's next.
Thank you very much. No, this visioning seems like it's almost an impossible word. Visioning can take 15 years. It all depends how you describe the visioning. Yeah, and the fact is that, and it's mentioned that it's cut through the bureaucracy. In here, we need a stick of dynamite to cut through the bureaucracy. No question about it. And, if you were a bank, I'd swear to God you've been held up. Okay, very, very simple. That's my wording. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. The fact is that somehow, I remember you in 1997 very well. Okay, and now we're 2013, that is 14, we're now 17 years later, or 18 years later. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So, to me, I really feel that you've been not treated fairly. I think you've been treated very unfairly. Okay, thank you. And I don't know what we must do to see that this thing moves ahead. I mean, I see where the line is there right next to you as far as development is concerned. And why that wasn't put in, I'll never know. As you say, the water reservoir is there, the services are there and close to you, and no reason why we can't go up a little further. So it's just really, I'll tell you, it's really frightening to me. Okay, thank you.
Well, in fairness, Council voted for, including Councillor Socorro, voted for those priorities. Councillor Reid.
Long
You
time
want
no
to get
see.
in an argument, you'll get in an argument.
No, I'm not.
You want a confrontation, you'll get a confrontation.
I'm not.
with me.
Well, I'm just-
These people have been treated like animals, not like human beings.
Okay.
So,
Councillor Reid.
two old realtors here, one on each side of the table.
We're on the same side.
We're on the same side. And
Which
all
one of you is old?
Yeah. Jeez, what a stupid question to ask me. I guess I want you to know that you're always on, there's a song, You're Always on My Mind, and you are, I know, in the planning staff. And we've had conversations, Jim and I, about your area many times. And it's no excuse, because I thought before Partington Creek came that we'd be on to Hazel Drive, and there was some work started. Then Partington Creek came along, which was important for us because we were getting, the whole world is seeing this undeveloped area, and we wanted to be ready in Partington to take advantage of any big commercial opportunities that could make that a viable village up there and be wonderful. The other things that have happened is we have a very aggressive engineering department now, and I see Catherine standing way back there. And I wanted Jim to be my knight in shining armor and take on the Oxford Street Way up into Hazel Drive, because I feel that there must be more than one, you must have more than Coast Meridian. You and I have agreed on that for years. So Jim has been taking that on with engineering, and Erica has been sort of stuck with us in all the other small things. I guess there is work being done, and I think you will find that we're probably in staff a little farther ahead than you probably think we are. Nothing's all down on paper, but I think you know that we have been working especially on transportation and engineering, and that's the hard stuff to get done. That's the hard stuff to do, the acquisitions that we need and move into your area. As for timing, I think we were going along fine until finally, after 26 years, the darn SkyTrain showed its ugly head. And all of a sudden, we've got all these people wanting to move into Burpee beside a SkyTrain station, and staff had to stop work, jump on that, and do a plan there. Because what was happening is we could have ended up with a zoo and who knows what else right at Coquitlam, because without a good plan and without a good transit-oriented plan, we were stuck. So that sort of happened in between, and it has put us behind in a lot of ways. Now, staff has ramped up in the last year. We've ramped up, and we're moving forward again. And as Jim has just said, you're coming forward next week. You aren't personally, but your area is. And we'll be able to work on it. I am sitting here like a miserable old bat wanting still for Coast Meridian. To me, the transportation is the biggie. I want Coast Meridian to go to the top. Some people want it to 4 lanes. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's really important to me that it just goes zooming right up. That's a big issue with engineering, but that's something that we've been, discussing and fighting, and not fighting, but arguing. And engineering has, what they think are arterials and collectors and all that. And we're going through all that. So all those patterns are being evolved. And so we are further ahead than you probably think we are. So I would like, next week, we are going to have a report. And I don't know what kind of a study we'll need. I don't know if we're ready to go bang into OCP changes. I don't know if visioning means the same thing that it's always meant, because there's not a lot to vision, right? No? So I get where you're coming from, and I think next week will be maybe the meeting that we have next week is then when we can meet with you, all of you, and or your representatives, and perhaps have a discussion on where we are and what we've got to do from there. But don't think that we're just sitting here like little mice in the trees. We actually have been kind of busy.
And Councillor Reid, we're not looking to the past. We're looking to the future.
I know you
We
are.
need to get this going.
I understand. I gotcha.
I want a pipe in front of Bill's door in 2 years.
Well, I could bring one up, but it won't be connected to anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the problem.
No, actually, May's laid it out pretty well. That's about where we've gone, and I don't want to revisit where we've been. I want to move forward. I think we can get there pretty quickly. Councillor Rasmussen.
Glenn, thanks for coming. Bill, thanks for coming. I've talked with staff, and I thought the visioning process was a way to get this done faster. mean, and I thought staff came up with a creative way rather than a regular area neighborhood plan that would have taken a lot longer to get done. I think there's still some ways with your plan running concurrently, maybe within the visioning process can work. But I also am concerned about getting that whole area right up there. I mean, I've known for a long time, and all the comments coming up, even when Ella was there, about only one access is Coast Marine. It doesn't matter if it's 4 lanes or 2 lanes or what the lanes are. There needs to be a secondary access, and we've heard that clear for years. That's the Oxford connector or whatever we need to be. So when we get into this plan, that's part of the idea, what I thought with the visioning process to speed it up, that if we just allow a development to go ahead in there, we don't have any plans or any thoughts about the other access roads and other issues within around that, we're asking for some problems. So we got a report coming next week, which hopefully, from my mind, was speeding up the process from a regular neighborhood planning process to get this profit. And part of that, maybe we can concurrently have your application involved in that and flowing together. But this is a lot faster than an area neighborhood plan. And yes, it's been too long, and there has been delays in it. But I think next week we got an opportunity to look at the report and discuss those issues with staff about, and I don't know how much quicker your application going through staff with all the studies would be than the visioning. It may be the best way to go. But I think we'll be able to ask staff those questions in more detail next week, but when we get that report. But I think the visioning process has to go ahead. If we can do it concurrently while at the same time and get the same speed in there, because there's issues surrounding the development that need to be addressed. It's the road access, the traffic access, connecting to different things, the water course of the streams, and everything like that. And so I don't know what reports are up to date, what needs to be brought up to date from your 97 to what your reports are. And I don't know that. But this I thought was a far better approach to speed up the development, which I think has been delayed too long, to get things done, for you get some certainty. I think all you guys just want to know is certainty of what your yield would be in the future, or what you can use if you want to build travel or if people do something like that. And I'm for that. But I think the process is good. We'll see that report next week. So that's some of the concerns I have. But I'd like to see it concurrent.
The city's going to have to deal with our OCP amendment. I mean, we're going to bring it forward. But something else that's happening is that, our properties up there have been approached by Metro Vancouver. And they want to put a tower to look after and monitor the water supply for Coquitlam and Surrey and whatnot. They've for 4 years been trying to find a place that's going to site to the Coquitlam Dam and onto, I guess, Mariner, and then over to Guildford and Surrey. There's only one site. It's on this property. They need that up and running. They can do it temporary for 2 years, but they need it up and running. So they're going to be before you with an OCP amendment. And we can deal with it at an OCP amendment with ours and do it together. They've been on the property 4 times. There's been helicopters up there. There's been weather balloons and whatnot. Some of the neighbors will have noticed it.
They haven't been on our property. They don't seem to come to City Hall to tell us about any of these things.
No, they've talked to engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
So, yeah.
The planning over there is going, oh.
So what they're working on now is obviously we don't want a tower on our property.
They just
So,
want to have lunch.
but they do it in the south, apparently. They've told us in palm trees and in trees and that sort of thing. They just need something to site. So they're working on how high it has to be and where it has to be. But they have looked for 4 years for something that'll site up to the Coquitlam Dam, to Mariner, and to Guildford. And so I'm just telling you, we're going to come ahead with an OCP amendment. They will be part of it, or they will be on their own. But there will be an OCP amendment, and it will be ahead of visioning.
Now we know.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Hodge, who lives up there. We're going to try and push a second access right through Glenbrook, I think.
Yes,
Yeah, well, now I have to excuse myself from the discussion. Yeah, thank you for coming. I see many of my neighbors and sort of longtime residents, and I used to consider myself a longtime resident of 18 years. But when I hear the names of the Ward family and that, and I know how long people have lived up there, and some of those people were helpful to me when I tried to build up there, and I built up there in the days of septic fields and wells. So I know the challenges of trying to build under those conditions. My vision is to move ahead, But as other councillors have said, I think we have to move ahead not only quickly but responsibly, because we all want to have a good development up there. And the challenge is, how do we make a good development and do it quickly? You have waited a long time. And, and I was part of those original discussions on the mountain and, what the timetable was going to be. And clearly, things have moved ahead in a westerly direction rather than a northerly direction. And most of the services go downhill. And we're lucky the services are now to the edge of your neighborhood, and we have to look at how we're going to do that. You are top of mind for me, not only because I live in the neighborhood, but you're my neighbors up there. So, when I drive home at night and I drive over the bridge that bears Eleanor's name. And when I go up into that neighborhood, I know that there's still work to be done to the north. And as I said, I think we have to do it in a responsible way. We have to do it in a timely way. As I said, it's on top of mind. We had a discussion just recently about Coast Meridian, and I was, like Councillor Reid, was one of the people that was talking about building that road for the future and talking about what's happening up on Hazel and up in that area. So we're starting to make those plans now. Those discussions are taking place, and I think the challenge that we have is to keep the discussion moving quickly so that we can actually see results from those discussions. And you have my commitment that we're going to try and do what we can to move this ahead, but it's got to be done in a responsible way. But I'm looking forward to the report next week, and I think that's when we can really begin that a real good, solid discussion on that.
So you do have our commitment, I think, that we're going to take your comments really seriously. There's a report coming. We do thank you for coming in, and I actually want to ask, how many in the audience agree with him? Good. Thank you very much. I do want.
Mr. McIntyre?
Well, okay. I want to acknowledge you for coming out as well on behalf of council, because I realize it's the middle of the afternoon, and but I also realize that it's pretty important to you all. So, thank you so much. Thank you. Your 5 minutes is up.
Good to see you.
Dynamite? Really? You did very well. Very well. And that's the tower he was talking about.
No.
The tower he was talking about.
Where is it?
Did you see this, or you just left?
It's a Mexican.
All right, 1 hour per subject, should do it.
Yep.
Okay, the next 5 minutes is for Mr. Burpee.
Our next delegation is from Sandy Burpee of the Tri-Cities Homelessness and Housing Task Group regarding development of a regional homeless transit plan.
Can you use the same rubber timer you
Now we've caught on to that one.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Councillors.
Is November over?
Pardon?
Is November over?
No, I take pride in growing it out and getting it cut, because that's the only part of my body that's actually growing hair right now.
Too much information, Sam.
I didn't mean to be that graphic, Councillors. I'm Sandy Burpee, Chair of the Tri-Cities Homelessness Housing Task Group. And just coming up the stairs today, I caught a glimpse of the Christmas tree, and I felt this pang of anxiety. And I recalled it was because this is the time of year we normally have our contentious public hearings.
Don't remind us.
This is the best that I can do today. So I'm speaking not just on behalf of the task group, but also on the Vancouver Urban Core Community Workers Association, which have formed a regional transit working group. In Metro Vancouver, there's often large distances that homeless people have to travel to access services, and because they are homeless, they're typically destitute. They don't have the money to be able to afford transit fares, so they have two choices. They can ride SkyTrain for free and suffer the possibility of a $173 fine and the additional sense of degradement that goes with that, or they can walk. Some homeless people have physical disabilities, and there are some distances that none of us probably would be prepared to walk. For instance, Joyce Lissamore, who is the coordinator of the Share Food Bank at Trinity United, tells me that currently they have 3 clients who are homeless who have HIV/AIDS, and the medical support for them is down at St. Paul's Hospital, and so obviously getting down there is quite a challenge. So there are barriers in the absence of viable options for transportation. And I think just in bringing it closer to home for us, 3030 Gordon Avenue, recognize, will be more than just a shelter, a roof. It'll be a place where people who are homeless will have the connection to services that can help them address their challenges. And that might be mental health services, addictions, medical aid, and so on. 3030 Gordon is a great location, close to transit, but again, the challenge, the barrier becomes being able to afford the transit fare. So the Regional Transit Working Group has approached both the province and Translink to request action and encourage them to work with them to create a regional homeless transit plan. And I have a motion today to offer to the city. It has been approved by the City of Vancouver and City of Surrey today. The New West is meeting tonight. And the motion is that be it resolved that the City of Coquitlam call on Translink to establish a task force with representation of provincial ministries responsible for public transit, health and housing, and the Regional Transit Working Group with the purpose of developing a regional homeless transit plan that will make the system accessible to homeless people while minimizing costs to Translink. And I brought copies for each of you, recognizing that there's a lot of words there.
There's a reason why you chose that particular spot to land this committee.
Sorry, which?
There's a reason that you chose that particular structure to put this committee at.
Yeah. The committee itself?
Yeah, the task group, sorry.
Yeah. Well, the organization that's proposing this regional transit plan is mentioned the Vancouver Urban Core Community Work Association, which is an organization of 40 frontline agencies and workers in the downtown east side, but recognizing that Metro Vancouver has homeless people distributed throughout the area. So it's more than just the downtown east side that needs attention.
Okay, are you finished? That's your.
I am finished. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a whole bunch of interest here. Councillor Reid, O'Neill, Nicholson, Asmussen. Reid.
Well, I'm actually quite angry that 3030 Gordon isn't up and running with light bulbs on and a Christmas tree out front. I just find that the wheels of government just seems to go so slow that it's almost backwards. I'm hoping, too, that some of the programs that the folks need, and not just the homeless folks, I mean, other than shelter for them, but some of the working poor. Do you know how many kids in this area, and I'm only finding some of this out now from, my grandson and granddaughter that go, and Quentin works in some of the youth groups. How many kids that can't afford to take the bus, and they're with working parents, but the parents aren't making enough money to get the kids bus passes or stuff. So I get kind of upset when we do so much for homeless, and don't get me wrong, I want to do something for the homeless too. But when I have parents that are having to do 2 and 3 jobs to even support their kids, and they're in the same boat, only worse, because they're contributing to the taxes that are paying for the homeless people. Like, where does charity begin and where does charity end? And I guess I have a great deal of difficulty. I agree with you, there has to be some way of getting help for any of those that are below a certain income level, and especially children, and especially the kids that are going to school. I don't know what to do. I know downtown, all the advocacies down there, they have so many transit routes. I mean, they could get up and scoot. For us, transit is, what did I call it this morning? Oh, to Greg Moore, I said transit. A bus out here is sort of like Bigfoot. You see them very rarely. So.
Kind of mythical almost.
Well, I'm sorry, but that they are. And I don't know what to do with this, Sandy. I will support you in whatever way I can, but I can't just keep supporting the homeless folks without supporting the working poor, and that's my dilemma. And I just want you to know that.
No, and thank you for expressing that, Councillor Reid. Actually, I believe you have a copy of the application I put in for the delegation. There's actually a second part to the motion that was passed in Vancouver and in Surrey,
Yes, income
which
assistance.
actually calls upon the Transleague to include a reduced fare option for individuals on income assistance, along the lines of those non-placed person disabilities and low-income seniors. When I was considering this weekend what I was going to say today, I looked at that again and thought that's not quite right, because Transleague, so far as I know, does not provide reduced fare options. The BC government does through the BC Pass program for people with disabilities and low-income seniors. So the working group was actually proposing that having that component, income assistance, you would get assistance with transportation as well.
But at least income assistance, some people are getting at. The working poor that I'm talking about are the ones that get nothing, and they can't afford anything, and these are the people that are falling through the cracks. And so if we're going to start helping anyone, let's help those that are actually trying to survive on their own and contribute to society. And those are the kids I want to help. So I don't know how we could quite do this, but the thought is right. We just got to get the stuffings right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thanks very much. I'm trying to put all the different pieces together here because, as we just heard, the provincial government does have a bus pass program for low-income seniors and those on disability. They've decided that the income assistance that those on welfare get is sufficient to handle their very basic needs. And I know it's certainly not luxury living, by the opposite. Now, the reason that homeless people don't get welfare is that they don't have an address, right? Otherwise, they would have an address and get welfare payments.
No, actually,
is that right?
I think over 50% of people who are homeless do get income assistance, surprisingly, because the Ministry of Social Development has a rapid access program for people who are homeless. When accompanied by an outreach worker, they can bring them in to the office, make that connection, and get the income
So this
assistance.
motion before us doesn't discriminate between those that are getting welfare and those that aren't.
No, it's what they're
So
missing.
if a homeless person on welfare, not having to pay rent, right, obviously, would have a lot more disposable income
What do you mean?
than the person on welfare who you're not saying deserves to get a transit pass.
Okay, you mean not paying rent or living in a shelter?
Well, or living in a tent. I mean, I'm not condoning. I'm not saying that that's the preferable outcome.
Well, they're probably living in a tent because at $375 a month, you're not going to find anything habitable. So
but they are getting a welfare payment and not having to.
Sorry, they can't
50%
get
of it.
they can't get shelter allowance if they're not living in a shelter. You're living in a tent, you don't get the $375. You have to be renting a place to get that. So if you're staying in a shelter, you're not going to get that either.
So if we're going, which means that there is some welfare payment, there is some social assistance available, but it doesn't include that $375 shelter allowance.
That's correct.
Okay.
So a person coming from a tent, let's say, and not even on any sort of welfare, going into the homeless shelter that the community is building here at 3030 Gordon, will have an address, will be able to get some partial welfare payments, and also retain those when they're in the transition house as well. That's part of it, the transition program.
I would expect so, but I can't tell you categorically that is the case, but I would expect that would be the case. The ones, so far as I know, living in the transition house, there will be rent, which would be presumably the shelter allowance that they receive.
Okay.
That's what I expect.
So they'll be about on the same footing as somebody living in a single-room occupancy place downtown on welfare, who don't have bus passes. But if they are described as homeless people, and a homeless person will continue to be described as a homeless person at 3030 Gordon, under your thought here,
If they're in the shelter, they're still homeless. They're deemed to be homeless.
Okay.
Transitional housing, no, but in
So
the
transitional
shelter,
housing,
yes.
no.
Yeah.
Okay, but in the shelter, still homeless.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's on top of the unfairness that Councillor Reid was talking about. It doesn't quite seem fair that people who are on welfare but aren't described as homeless, but still in roughly the same situation, sort of housing, being housed, wouldn't be covered by this motion before us today. Anyway, so everybody's working hard to help the homeless situation, and certainly we've made great progress here, but we want to make it fair, and the provincial government has taken made a lot of tough decisions about the proper allocation of public resources, and we've made a lot of tough decisions here. The council's before me about proper allocation of valuable city land, and it's been very good stuff. So there's still questions I have with this.
I'm expecting, Councillor O'Neill, that this particular group that formed the Regional Transit Working Plan, their focus are people homeless. That's what they advocate for. I think all of us have a scope of activities which we advocate, and certainly our task group, as you know, is broader than homelessness. It's also affordable housing. But this particular group of frontline agencies, they specifically deal with people who are homeless.
Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Reid talked about the many areas where things need to be different, things need to be better. And that's certainly true, and I could seize this opportunity to talk for 10 minutes about the living wage and things like that, which would help to solve that problem. But I'm not going to do that today.
Good.
That's right. I'm not going to offer anybody the opportunity to talk about things that we're not supposed to do.
Or to rule you out of order.
That's right. But Ben May also said, we don't know what to do. And it's true. We know that there's a problem. We don't know what to do. And what this motion does is asks those most closely involved, those knowledgeable, TransLink, the agencies, the people who work with those who are affected, to devise a plan. That's all we're asking is a plan. This doesn't say who should pay. It doesn't deal with the many, many difficult questions that are to arise. It attempts to make sure those questions are dealt with and that something gets done. The plan might include distinctions between homeless on welfare and homeless not on welfare, all those kinds of things. But that's not for us today. Ours is, here's an opportunity to ask the right people to put their heads together and find a solution. I keep looking for opportunities for the mayor to rule me out of order, so I don't think I can make this motion at this moment, but I would like to, at the end of our discussion, conclude how we could deal with it, how we can move this effort forward, whether it's by notice of motion later today or by simply asking staff to bring us back a report expeditiously. But I am going to ask Sandy whether, I was sitting here thinking, well, maybe we should have a last phrase that says by March 31st or something like that. But it seemed to me that perhaps simply call on TransLink to quickly establish a task force, because with all us bureaucracies, quick is in the eye of the beholder. You've listened to the previous delegation, no doubt. So I think this is something that we should support. It doesn't ask anyone to spend any money. It asks people to come up with a solution. And it asks the right people to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Rasmussen?
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for coming. I guess I'm a little confused, and I'll clarify. I work in transit. We have the social services pass, which is available. You don't need an address for it. As long as you have below a certain income level, and it's $45 a month. In some cases, they can waive the $45 a month. So, and I know from my experience picking up a lot of people who are homeless that have a pass in the past. There are people we've had. It's going to change with the new compass system that TransLink's bringing in, but we've had problems for a long time of the selling of the passes and getting into people that weren't supposed to have. If someone gets a pass for $45, it's good
and selling it for $25 or $50. And so we're going to form a task force, but I guess my question is, what are the failings of the social services plan and transit plan that does go out to all those low-income people, whether you're seniors or anybody in a group? So I guess that would be my first question.
Well, I'm assuming you're referring to the BC bus pass system?
The Provincial Government Social Services.
I checked the MST website this weekend, and it's only for people with disabilities and low-income seniors. That's what the website says, and that's what I've been told through this process. So I don't have experience.
Well, it's a lot of people who are on welfare. It's just not low-income seniors. So I think there should be a recheck. Because I mean, there's way more people with government social passes that are.
The website does say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And so I would like you guys to seek clarification underneath that program and see where that's. Because I mean, I just deal with it. I'm just telling you, I don't know what the but I see what I deal with, and I know whether it's east side of Vancouver, this area, with people that are homeless, different people that has a broad range of people that aren't disabled or seniors that have that pass. So that's where I was kind of a little stuck at this.
The disability does include mental illness.
I understand that.
It's not something that.
But visible. I'm just saying. You know, I mean, look, and I'm just telling you from my experience.
No, I value that, as a matter of fact, because you've been a great support in the past in addressing homelessness issues in the Tri-Cities because of that experience and the compassion that you obviously feel for people who are homeless. So I understand that.
Well, and I do, and I mean, for a lot of us drivers, I mean, we get a lot of people who you will see as generally homeless that you give free rides to. There's some of them who lost their pass, sold their pass, getting on the bus, and you can tell them a lot of times where a person is. You just get over the years, you know, who is playing you for a free ride and who's actually generally, whether it's a working poor, as May said, or somebody else that gets a free ride. The system is changing, though, and I think for a good pattern, you're going to have 3 separate passes. We have 100 different types of ways to pay to get on transit right now. It's going to come down to 3 passes. It's going to be an adult concession, and then a card that encompasses everything from disability, government passes, everything under another card that all will fit underneath there. So there may be some more tweaking of that plan. So that's what I would like to see, some broader defined. I would think the task force should look at then talking with the provincial government under there. My only fear always is that, you know, under TransLink right now, it has no new funding. We're struggling to provide the services, and I don't know where TransLink would get the funds to. My worry is always that of a province seeing an opportunity to download this BC pass or that pass onto TransLink. And so I have no problem with forming the working group, but I just would really think the target should be that BC pass clarified out, added into, because I guess when I sat here, and I'm still on this, I mean, I see it. I see lots of those passes, more than seniors, young people, a lot of different ages groups all having those passes. You know, the only reason when you're supposed to know is by looking at everybody's pass, at this present time will go away, is it shows their date of birth on it. And so that's how you as a driver are supposed to tag that person's actually their pass or not, by looking at the age on it. So I had people, you know, but there could be other disabilities in there, but I don't think so. So my focus would be in this motion would be to focus the provincial government to broaden then the BC bus pass plan. And then as you've done with the homelessness task force and the Hope of Freedom, their outreach, one of the big successes was getting services, getting them connected to the services and having them aware that this is available to them. I think that's one of the options that we have to make sure that the homeless are aware of what's available to them. Thank you, Senator.
I've got similar concerns to what we're just expressing, but Councillor Reid, I think, said it best. The example that I cite is this young student that I know that's in French immersion or was in French immersion. I asked about his French about a month ago, and he's not in French immersion anymore because his father, developmental illness, the marriage broke up. His mother lives too far from the French immersion school and can't afford a bus pass because she's now working 2 jobs trying to hold a family together, mortgage, all of those sorts of things, and they may well lose their house. They certainly have lost the child's, this is a gifted learner, this is an amazing child. One of their other children has special needs, so this is a family that's struggling now. And I don't know how to, I look at the wording here and it says that there are, and in fact I'm looking at the BC bus pass because I read the same thing. You have to be 18 to 64 with a disability, or 60 to 64 receiving income assistance, or over 65, etc. And there's essentially it's the BC bus pass program offers reduced cost annual bus passes for low-income seniors and individuals receiving disability assistance from the province of British Columbia. The wording on your delegation request was that we work out something, and to request that TransLink include a reduced fare option for individuals on income assistance along the lines of those, etc. And we're left with TransLink. I'm on the TransLink Mayor's Council, and we constantly get screamed at because TransLink should run like a business. Because TransLink doesn't have a social objective other than trying to run a transit system somewhat efficiently, to the extent that they can. And we constantly hear of these other initiatives, and one of them, for example, was the UPass. The province came in and said, we're going to fund UPass for an expanded group of institutions. It can be a pass that students can get for almost nothing, and they can sell on Craigslist, which is Councillor Hodges' other business, sell on Craigslist for whatever, and as a result, we end up with a whole bunch of fare-paying folks that no longer pay fares. They buy their students' UPass or their friends' UPass to get to work. And in 3 years, we may well find that UPass, the provincial funding evaporates, and TransLink has to absorb it and try to run like a business. So I'm not against this. I'm trying to find a way that we can expand. No, we can't, rather, but we can ask the province to expand the number of, or the range of groups that are eligible for reduced fares funded by the province. Because local government can't do redistribution of income. We can't do that because we don't have income tax. We have property tax. We have very limited funding. And so that's where I'm struggling with. I'm looking at the motion as something that I suspect I can support. I think, though, that it doesn't require TransLink's work as much as it requires the province to recognize that this is a serious issue, not only for the homeless, and I accept that, but for single moms, for a group of working poor, for a whole range of individuals for whom transit is inaccessible as soon as you put a fare gate up. And so
Well, I said I didn't include the second component when I looked at this weekend because I didn't think that TransLink was the appropriate body. It should be the province who's approached. It would be part of this working group. It would be a province who would be expanding the application of the BC pass system. If council were in favor of this motion and adding that bit back on, that certainly would be, or whatever wording you think would be appropriate to cover the concerns that are being expressed here would be, that'd be appreciated. So.
Just replacing TransLink with BCW in this motion.
That's right. That may well be the best thing because
well, he's talking about Provincial Ministries, though.
Yeah, the TransLink can't establish a task group with the province's participation, and if the province doesn't participate, so we really, TransLink would undoubtedly do it if the province said, let's do it. So I tend to agree with that suggestion, and since this is on the agenda, I don't think we as a committee need a notice of motion. I think a motion is fine, but would only be the motion moved to council next week anyway. So we allow that, and I'm looking at Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is fine, but doesn't go near far enough. Number one, and I'll talk about the situation. Okay, you get a lot of people working minimum wage. That's all they get. The gas attendants. That's all they get. Doesn't matter. They work 2 days, 2 jobs a day. That's all they get. You get the pub people. You get the restaurant people work on minimum wage. But I know for a fact that there's people working minimum wage and taking $200 and $300 a night in tips. How do you really differentiate that? You can't. See, so it's pretty tough to really say, does it go far enough? No, it doesn't. And yet in certain areas, I was in the hotel restaurant business, and I'll tell you something, back in the 70s, at a dining room that every waitress went home with the $200 to $300 night tip in a 6-hour shift. It's just, the people are leaving 15-20%. I'll go to a restaurant and I'll never walk out of there without leaving a 15% tip for a waitress. So it goes, and yet the people that pump your gas, they do a very important job for you and everything else, but they're minimum wage. And you tip them? No, you don't. See? So then how do you say, okay, how about the gas station attendant? How about other people that are making minimum wage, period, and no more than that, So those are the things that I...
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
I tend to agree with Councillor Nicholson. We're not trying to decide how we're going to do this. We're not trying to decide which groups should be included. We're just encouraging people who know a lot more than us to get together and come up with a solution. How are we ever going to expect homeless people to get jobs, get the services that they need, go to appointments if they can't get on a bus? So I fully support this, and I think it's just the first step.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hold my calls?
That's mine. I should have turned it off.
Yep, you should. Okay, and that's the last of our speakers. Thank you very much. This is the delegation portion of it.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thanks. And
Councillor Asmussen, sometime I'd like to tell you about taking a bus in Croatia.
Okay. A little different?
Quite an experience, yes.
Oh, don't tell him that, because then he'll think that our bus drivers are better.
Your Worship, I would move that we investigate a bus driver exchange program.
Oh, there she goes.
Do we know when we can send?
Yeah, find out.
How long of a minimum exchange do we call it?
We'll call it we'll get a stepsister city relationship. And on behalf of council, once again, Mr. Burpee, thank you for all you do.
It's going to have to be changed.
Okay, I'm going to add that as OB.
And then take the last couple cents that were overwhelming, minimizing the cost of transport.
If we have time, we'll have a discussion today. Okay. Now let's move to the first item on today's agenda.
Item 4 is report of General Manager Planning and Development regarding the Industrial Zones Review Stage 2 progress report. We have introductory comments by the General Manager Planning and Development.
A motion to approve would be fine.
Move recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Reid.
I only have a couple.
Do you have a presentation that you wanted to do?
I was going to say,
Would you be offended? Okay.
I'll be really quick.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Because first, I'm really pleased to be here before council today with this update and information about the industrial zone consolidation. We've been at it for a number of years. We've reported back to council on occasion, and it always shows up in our annual work plan. We keep saying we're working towards it, so it's gratifying to be here today at a real critical point. What we wanted to do is check in with you, talk about what we're proposing in terms of consolidating industrial zones, how that approach is being sort of set out, potential issues around that, and some challenges, because it's always difficult when you take 9 zones, collapse down to 3, you're affecting 345 properties and 770 business licenses. So there's some challenges inherent in that. So we wanted to get council's feedback this afternoon, hopefully your support to move forward, and also as well to sort of set out what we're proposing for consultation. The report is fairly lengthy and comprehensive, but I trust you found it clearly written. Covers a lot of ground. But attached to the report are a series of things. There's the actual zones, the draft zones we're proposing, the 3 new zones. That would be the M1 General Industrial, the M2 Industrial Business Zone, and a whole new zone abbreviation, a B1 for a business zone. Along with that attachment, there was a series of maps, and this is really sort of the guts of the work, is taking those 3 industrial zones, looking at the 345 existing zone properties, all the business licenses that correspond to that, and then applying a best fit approach to try to land the proper zone on the property in question. In a handful of cases, we've actually come to the conclusion that none of the industrial zones really fit those particular uses. Surprise, surprise. And so what we're suggesting as an alternative is just face reality. They're essentially service commercial uses, and so the closest associated zone would be the CS1 service commercial. So there's a long series of maps, and I really got to give Erica and her staff credit for this map work, because there's a lot of work in there. You're looking at each property, what the zoning is now, what we would propose as a zone. So the maps try to illustrate that. Lastly, just very briefly, sort of the next steps that we'd like to proceed with is the consultation process. And this is really going to be the make or break stage in this project, as far as we're concerned. The process we've set out would use a variety of information distribution and feedback methods to get information out to a group of, or a number of groups. Obviously, the business and property owners, commercial, industrial, real estate brokers, UDI, MAOP, Chamber of Commerce, and as well as broadcast it more broadly for the general public and seek their input as well. So if we're good to go with this process, based on Council's comments today, we'd like to launch that consultation process in early 2014. It'll take a month or two. And trusting that we get some good feedback through that process, we would then summarize that and come back to Council with the draft bylaws and the related OCP amendments in spring, mid-late spring, to carry on this process. So that's my comments. We're here for your feedback and hopefully to get the green light to proceed.
I accept that the maps were a voluminous bunch of work, so thank you. Councillor Reid, Hodge, O'Neill.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of questions, but when I used to do a lot of commercial work, I think I'm alone responsible for at least M8 and M9 zones, because we had nowhere else to put anything, so we just made new zones, right? Sort of like kitchen drawers. I want to go to page 2. And I want to specifically talk about the review on the office space, the implications of allowing general office down in the southern area as opposed to town center. You said the review concluded that office uses in that location would not compete with city center. If you haven't done any consultation yet, who concluded it?
Through the chair, that was a study that we had retained a consultant to go out and do some analysis, talk with the brokers in the area, and look at the Coquitlam situation compared to other suburban office markets, and they came back with that assessment.
So it was an outside consultant that did it?
But staff wrestled with that too, and reported back.
Yeah. Okay, and I remember it coming up before, and I remember when you first brought it to council, and I said, well, what about the tax implications, remember? And you said, oh, we never thought of that. So went back, and we've come back, and that's all good. So, okay, so that's one thing. The other thing I had is on page 4, and it's with respect to the medical marijuana. And I wanted to know if you've got just sort of a point form what the other cities are doing now since the laws have changed a bit. We had a big deal on it, what was it, last year at UBCM or the year before? Last year, I believe. And all the cities were trying to come up to get the little wrinkles out. And I wondered...
Should we maybe establish a joint committee or something?
Oh, that's really bad.
Sorry.
Great question.
We'll refer that.
Chair, great question. We actually are a little bit ahead of the curve in actually having addressed this use. We are just beginning to get inquiries from some of our cohorts and other municipalities asking, Coquitlam, what did you do to address this issue? And I think what a lot of them are doing is similar solution to what we did, which is to find a zone that was least prevalent in the city in order to reduce the risk of that use occurring within their city bounds.
Okay. And so while we're on that, is that the same like Zone Z that we put the adult porn stores and all that stuff in?
Yeah, it's not quite the same, and that's why in the report we were speaking to maybe some other options, conditions of use around this in terms of minimizing the risk, because the M2, the new M2, would be much more prevalent than the current M3 zone.
Yeah. So I'm really concerned about that. Like, I want one spot, you know, that's about it. And the 17 properties that you've identified that are into CS1, I'm hoping that we aren't going to just start doing this and then go out and say to the people, oh, well, by the way, you're now zoned. Yeah. So not without consultation. I have two more questions. The Barnett Corridor, I see what you've done, and that's a dog's breakfast. It's quite fascinating where it is. But we really, all we've done right now is just sort of place the properties that are all rezoned, and they're all doing the wrong things in the wrong zones, and it's just a nightmare. So for now, what you've done is just accord what you would consider the appropriate new zone for them. And so it has nothing to do with what rezoning might take place when we go in for the evergreen look in the transit-oriented area, correct?
Correct.
And we've done no studies on transit-oriented TODs on that strip, correct?
To the chair, that's correct. So what we're showing
No,
here
that's just
is proposed zoning for discussion.
Let's call it replacement zoning.
Replacement zoning?
Because then that makes more sense.
Okay.
We're just replacing these zones with the ones that they were.
And in doing that, too, we're in fact providing, I think, greater flexibility, whereas they may have been shoehorned into a zone like this, they're now in a zone like that. So this would be an initiative at the end of the day that the city would be leading. So it's sparing the property owner that effort and cost.
And my last question, and the most important one to me, is how are we going to do all of this consultation? And I'm wondering if economic development can get involved in the consultation process with you. And I think that's kind of an important thing for us, so that we can sort of all move along together on this. And that would be, I don't mean that you have to do miles of reports, but I think it's really important, because when we look at some of this stuff, and in the report, and I read it and I was quite interested, but you always say that you'll look at a piece of property and then you'll look at the surrounding uses in order to put it in the right position. However, the surrounding uses can change at any time, and that becomes sort of a moving target. So I'd really like economic development to take a look at this as well in the properties that are a little edgy.
Through the chair again, David has been very closely involved in this process. In fact, he was one of the early reviewers of the report. We've worked closely throughout the process, and I would really welcome him as being part of the consultation process. He's 345 doors to go knock on. I think he can probably get that done in a week or two. So.
Perfect. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Please
good
report out before Christmas.
As you're coming down the chimney. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, and Councillor, we had flagged a lot of the same things I had here, so I'll just quickly skip over or go through them. Glad to see that we're going up for consultation. Look forward to hearing what the Chamber of the business community have to say. We touched the office, concerned about competing office development. I had flagged, we've covered that. Medical marijuana, I raised this when we first looked at this and said, how's that going to work? So I'm glad to see that we've looked at that. As we had said, we had sort of identified a zone that had very few properties in it, and it worked well. And I think that was a very creative approach that we had taken. And I know that at a challenging time, a lot of cities looked to see how we were going to deal with that. Of course, now that those properties of which that zone in which only had, I believe, 2 properties in it, has now been blended in, so that now we've got a whole lot of zones where those where medical marijuana grow-ups could now be proposed. So I'm interested in that when it says that staff are considering additional restrictions, such as locations near schools and things, and hopefully those restrictions, coupled with the new restrictions that are being put on this by the federal government, will prevent us from having a large, number of these medical grow operations.
Could we call it pot zoning instead of spot zoning?
Pot zoning?
Oh my God. You groaned at my pun.
I guess my questions are, this is sort of a unique opportunity, and I really like the idea that we're streamlining and going from 9 down to where we've got just to the couple that we've got here, the 3 that we have here. My concern is, I guess that normally when you're laying out a city or a new in the neighborhood, you set your zoning, and then businesses or people or whoever, development chooses the zoning before they build. And so what I'm seeing here is it looks like what we've done is we looked at what that business is, and then we've just tried to overlay the appropriate zoning rather than doing the reverse. So by doing this, does this mean that we won't have any non-conforming businesses? Or will we have some that we have to grandfather in? Or, how is that going to work? Or is it we'll allow it till now, but when that business moves out, the next one that comes in is going to have to conform to a new zoning? Is that sort of how we're going to do this?
And therein is one of the huge challenges. Just a couple comments, and Erica may want to talk about it because we spent many hours wrestling with this. You're correct in that we look at a site with the current business operation, building condition, what the business license says, what the area is like. We're trying to get the best fit. But it's not just simply looking at it with those blinders on. We do try to apply sort of a broader community planning perspective. Like, how's this area evolving? What's in the general neighborhood? What can we see over time? Because obviously the community's changing and changing quite rapidly. So it's a combination of trying to minimize nonconformity, but also trying to give some sense of where the direction that area may be evolving to. With the nonconformity, I'll let Erica talk about this because this is really, I think, her particular concern. There may be some instances where we'll have no choice, but as I said, one case was to move properties to the CS1 zone, or in other cases, we may have to have a special site-specific permitted use for that zone and that, on that property under that zone. And there's a couple of those that are identified in the report, like some of the plants up the Pipeline Road corridor. But around the nonconformity, I don't know, Erica, you want to comment further?
Sure, there's much more I can add to it. I think he's covered it off pretty well. To the extent that we can, we've really tried to minimize the number of non-conforming uses but we will most likely still have a few that will be there, and under the Local Government Act, they will be able to continue to operate until a new business comes in.
But when the new business comes, then we can say, okay, so the nonconformity or the grandfathering will apply to the business, not to the use of the property then. Is that correct? When that business moves, then we'll be able to go back and sort of say that either to change the zoning or say that that's not appropriate in this zone as we move forward.
My understanding, the nonconformity goes with the property. And so if there's a business operating there and it's nonconforming, and either that business is bought by another operator or it's a different company comes in and operates the same business, as long as the operation hasn't been discontinued for greater than 6 months. So you have a 6-month window. Yep. You pass that, you lose your nonconforming status. So it's not tied to one business only. It goes with the property.
It is the use.
Okay. And in terms of reducing the number of zones and redoing the whole process here, what are other cities doing? Have others moved in this direction to reduce? Are we sort of leading the way? I'm just sort of wondering, from a business standpoint, it would be great that, I like to see conformity region-wide, and I'm just sort of wondering, are other cities moving towards these three, and so that when a business comes into Coquitlam, they'll sort of say, oh yeah, I'm used to that because we've done that. Are we sort of leading the pack, or are others moving this direction, or how do we sort of fit in with our neighbors?
A bit of an apples to oranges comparison, I have to say, because a lot of other municipalities have a very different approach to how they do zoning. Like, for example, a lot of municipalities use CD zoning, with every proposal that comes forward, so it's a unique zone applied to a specific site. I think we're one of the few remaining municipalities in the region that actively updates its zones and keeps its zoning bylaw up to date, and constantly we're doing housekeeping amendments. Many municipalities don't do that because they use the CD zoning process, so they rely on that process to deal with development issues.
If I could just add, at the start of the process, and it's going back a couple of years ago, I can barely remember, but we did do a comparison. We did check around. We wanted to see what we thought were some of the leading business communities. Where you see a lot of business development in the last 10, 15 years. Well, Burnaby, Richmond. So we went in Surrey, and so the consultant that assisted us on this went and reviewed their zones. So we wanted to see how we stacked up, how they were organizing things, and could we do better than that.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
And for our next one, Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, got lots of little notes, and I'll try to get through them. Some of this we covered. First off, the consultation. In the next step consultation, it talks about mailing out of a letter to every affected industrial property and give them 30 days to respond. Are those letters going to be mailed out like tomorrow, or is that in the new year? Because if it's tomorrow, that goes through Christmas holidays and everything, and that's a bad time.
In the new year.
In the new year. Yeah. So we've got some breathing time there. Good. I just wanted to make sure they're not going out tomorrow. That would be asking a lot of people to bring too much work on their vacations, I guess. On the marijuana impact, the bylaw that we passed was specific to the current federal legal atmosphere, and that's all changing. Is that bylaw going to have to change as well?
My understanding is that what we have adopted is actually going to conform to what new federal regulations are going to be, because we've prohibited the sale outright, and the new federal regulations will only allow the sale through a mail order. Yeah. And then the grow-up will be allowed still, so nothing will change with respect to our bylaw except the name of the federal regulation itself.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Just very quickly through the chair, the work that we did reflected the new federal system that's coming in next year. Heather is actually going to give an update report to council early in the new year relative to zoning, to tighten up the zoning based on the changes that are being made in this report. So there will be a report coming in.
Well, that's super, because I think everybody around council wants it to be as tight as possible. Yeah. And that's a euphemism for being drunk, not high. So. Okay. Isn't it?
We're so bad around here.
Now, I was having a little difficulty putting all these wonderful maps together. I did look at them, and one of the questions I had was several months ago we had a huge delegation in here from Kia, and they were running into a roadblock about. It wasn't meant to be a pun either about the car dealership. About how they would fit. They wanted to move into an area of United Boulevard that wasn't quite the right zone. With this simplification, would that be the right zone for a Kia type operation?
I believe they were going to be on a site that's currently zoned M8. That site would be B1 under the proposed zoning. The B1 zone would not allow for a car dealership.
Oh, okay.
We would take, I think we discussed some approaches in terms of what you
talked about CD too.
Yeah, this might be one of those instances where I was saying before, for a site-specific basis, a use would be permitted. So on that site, as per their proposal and council's direction, that use would be permitted.
Okay, so it would have to go through the process there. I just wondered if it automatically under this it would benefit, but it's still going to be neat to work. There was a lot of sympathy for Kia's plight around the council table, as I recall. There was no motion passed or anything, but they had a very strong delegation. Oh, and speaking of those maps, to prove that I did look at the maps, the very first one that you have, actually, there's a mistake in there. The very first one, attachment 2, it says Barnett Highway, and that should be Burnett. Okay, so I'm not sure if that was you guys or somebody, but anyway, sorry about that. But I had a point.
It's a regional growth strategy map.
It's okay. There you go.
Well, very good.
we can really
One
mess
more
up
regional growth
we can really mess up Metro Vancouver by misinforming them about where Highway 7A is. Barnett Highway 7A. Okay. So that map is done. I also asked about Kia. I'm also interested in helping you understand the impact on the aggregate operations. And I see that one of the aggregate operators is here today, so he's probably interested in this question. I'm the chair of the Coquitlam River Aggregate Committee, and talk about, on page 4, talk about 2 sites which are currently zoned M4 asphalt concrete plant. And they have concrete and asphalt batching plants. Those addresses, well, I thought there was 3 addresses where this takes place along Pipeline Road. Well, so page 4 of the original report, I thought there was 3 big concrete and asphalt batching.
There might be, and we can certainly double check to make sure that we capture those.
Yeah, okay. Good. So, yeah, that's so I don't know if you didn't have that one in there because it's in a different zoning area. Mm-hmm. I'm also aware that there's been a long-term conflict regarding there's a world-class rock splitting operation at the end of Pipeline Road there it's in a funny gray area on zoning, and I hope this new process helps rectify that problem. You know what I'm talking about?
I think you're speaking about bedrock?
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be dealt with separately.
It'll be dealt with separately.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. One last question. I think overall impact in terms of finances. So it does talk, the report on page 6 does talk about assessment authority generally values commercial land at a higher rate than industrial land. We'll, through this process, and those properties that were identified as going to be rezoned CS1 service commercial, is there going to be more acreage that's zoned commercial now as a result of this, or more acreage that is going to be zoned industrial as a result of this process? And if so, what? Have you looked at that? Is there going to be marginally more land pushed into commercial? And if so, will that have a financial impact on it? That would probably be a positive impact, although this isn't being done to raise money or anything. But if you looked at that issue about how much actual square meters of land is going to end up being moved from commercial to industrial or vice versa?
We don't have actual numbers, but yes, in answer to your question, there will be more land that's zoned CS1 as a result of this exercise. We're not adding any additional land to the industrial zones. It's actually a bit of a subtraction exercise, but it's one that's based, as was mentioned before, on a best fit analysis in terms of looking at the uses and what they're actually doing now. For example, a lot of the uses along the south side of Barnett Highway, as you know, are truly service commercial uses, and yet they have them in 6 industrial zones.
So that'll be a double-edged sword for the owners of that land, because the assessments reflect the commercial zoning. The value of their property will rise a bit, and they might be sitting on more valuable land, but they're going to have to pay higher taxes.
In the report, we've tried to address this, and again, I'll let Erica speak to this as well, because she's even talking with BC assessment staff today. The setting of property taxes is a complicated process. Certainly from our side of it, we know the challenges there. But from the BC Assessment Authority, zoning is but one factor that comes into play, and so they have these categories. The same way we were trying to categorize industrial business operation into 3 zones. They've got different rate classes. There's a heavy or standard general industry, and that's usually for the big mills and that sort of thing. There's the light industry, and then there's a business class. And so they've kind of, strangely enough, have the same sort of grouping that we do. And they look at how the property is being used. What is the business? What is the fundamental nature of that business? And so how does it then fit into that scale? Zoning, OCP designations play a role, but perhaps more so looking ahead to the future. That's why people want to have their lands, if they're out in the fringe area, redesignated in an OCP for higher density. It raises the value. In other cases, such as this, and this is one of the things we'll have to have communication with the property owners around, is that by going to these different zones, let's talk about, if you have concerns that's going to affect your property value, let's talk about that. And so at least there's an understanding that way.
Good. Yeah, and I think the consultation is very important. And as part of that consultation, there should be, I think, some sort of mention about possible long-term consequences of if they're a property owner that's going to be put into commercial from industrial. The sort of report you gave us here, I think that would be good to let them get the heads up on that. Double-edged sword. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo for the first time today.
So this is quite a large report for a newbie, that's for sure. So I'm probably not quite as in-depth as my partners here at the table, but
It's a large report for us.
There was something that popped into my mind that I haven't heard discussed yet, and it was jobs. Immediately when I saw this, I was actually quite excited because, this is a wonderful way to address, sorry Neil, to bring it back to the living wage. This is a wonderful way to address opportunities for living wage, because we know we're not unlike the rest of Canada, where retail is our number one industry for jobs in Coquitlam, which is unfortunate because they're not good paying jobs. So I guess my question that came up is about diversity of opportunities for jobs in Coquitlam. And one thing that I was concerned about when I read the M1 General Industrial was this idea of wholesaling. And so my question is, are there checks and balances that will be in place or that are already in place to make sure that we don't saturate for particular business types, like could United Boulevard all of a sudden just turn into a big warehouse in place where there's limited jobs with a lot of square footage? So I looked through the report and I didn't see a lot addressing opportunities for jobs for Coquitlam. And so then I do have concerns of taking our industrial, some of our industrial, and putting it into more of a commercial service application. So yeah, is there checks and balances in place to make sure that we're not putting 4 people in a huge piece of land?
Some really good questions there. And early in the process, that was one of the things that we focused in on, because we recognized our industrial land supply is limited. In some cases, there's going to be a little bit of an erosion here with things going to service commercial. But some of the earlier amendments were around allowing more intensive use of those zones. So more intensive use, so presumably you'd get higher employment numbers. So that was one of the earlier considerations. We're thinking is that in expanding the range of uses within a zone, it gives that ability for a company to have multiple operations there. That might just not be their processing, but also their warehousing. Some limited office as well as some limited sales out of that location. Again, the zoning is there to provide the framework. It's really to the business community to respond on how they want to, locate their businesses where and what sort of extent of production. I would think what we're proposing here will expand the opportunity for things other than just warehousing. And so hopefully the business community sees that and seizes that opportunity.
But how do we protect ourselves again? So before we were limited where we could have warehousing, but now perhaps we have a lot larger M1 general industrial footprint. What if everybody decides to be a warehouse? Like, how do we protect that the entire M1 zone doesn't just turn into a big warehouse?
Actually, we're not limited now. The industrial use allows for warehousing as well as manufacturing, transporting, distributing, the full range of industrial type functions. All of our industrial zones allow for that type of use now. So by actually consolidating, we're not removing that ability within that industrial use in the 2 new zones that will be left.
So you're saying there's no opportunity for more warehousing in Coquitlam with these new zoning?
There's no change essentially, because we're taking the existing industrial zones that all currently have permitted industrial uses on them, and they will have one of the 2 new zones, the M1 or the M2, but they'll still have that industrial use on them. So there'll be no change in the range of industrial type uses that they can have on their industrial zone property.
Okay. So if there was a zone before, and like I said, I'm new, so I don't necessarily know all of them, but if there was a zone before that did not allow warehousing, but it's now fallen into M1 general industrial, so it does now allow warehousing. You're saying none of that happened? There are no zones before?
In fact, it's a little bit of the contrary. That there's a greater range of uses that are now permitted in those zones. And part of that is for example, is the feedback we get through David Monroe and what he's hearing from the companies looking for locations and the brokers. Some of our zones right now will not permit the type of business operation that they want to operate in that location. So by allowing a greater degree of office and a little looser definition around engineering technologies and that, you can allow those more labor-intensive and higher-paying employment opportunities to come in there. So hopefully, again, and it's the same observation around the United Boulevard corridor. A lot of big box, appliance and furniture stores. What we're proposing under the B1 zone is to allow that office. So maybe in time, you see a conversion from big box, essentially warehouse retail, into more employment-intensive office space.
Okay, so if you're telling me that there's no opportunity for, there's not more space for warehousing, that we could get saturated with warehousing, then that's great.
Okay. Councilor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you, Jim. I think it's been 8 years since I was on economic development that the committee brought forward, Craig was on that committee, and brought forward the need to reduce from 9 down to 3 zones. And it's been a lot of work, and I'm glad to see us finally getting to this here, because the biggest issue is we have unleased units. We don't have, or attracting the type of businesses, and I talked to the different people within the selling of commercial land and stuff back then about the difficulty of getting businesses and jobs to locate in Coquitlam, the more valued jobs, greater business jobs, because we just haven't been able to do the complexity. So I think you guys have done a tremendous amount of work here on getting this to where we're going to now. I think the 17 properties I think you've done a good job on those properties going into the CWOCP, because there's kind of there's a balance there. Yes, there may be some more property taxes potentially, but you've also, as you point out in the report, and I thank May for making that comment when it came back that time about, okay, what's the assessment going to happen on this? And it's not as bad as we thought it might have been, and that's only one factor. And for some of these properties going to CWOCP zone, it may be more property taxes potentially, but they have a greater value of capitalization than to help expand and operate their business. So it's can probably balance out in that regard. Now, you've allowed an FSR, I guess, about 1.5, so we're allowing buildings in all zones, from what I saw, to go up to 6 stories within the setback that are allowed, right?
There's actually no change on our setbacks and our...
On the setbacks, but the height, now
There's no change. From what we currently allow in our industrial zones to what we're proposing to do, we're not making any changes.
But was that change made in the first phase? That was the first phase. So we went from under for 1 to about 1.5 or something?
We actually eliminated the FAR, the floor area ratios, and we now regulate it by lot coverage and setbacks and height.
That's good, because that's one of the other issues that was out there, that was for businesses wanting a different structure, a different type of thing that we were limiting. So I forgot that from the first phase. It's been going on for what really started this about 3 years ago, Jim? In earnest, about 4 years ago, we actually got this started.
It's been underway for a while. It came out of the industrial land survey that we did back then, and this is one of the early steps. But we've been...
It started about a number of years, but was delayed. And we really started back into about 3 years ago to get the first phase to second. Now we're on the second phase.
That's right, incrementally amending the zones over time. This is really the big leap now.
Now, the other side on the Pipeline Road, and that's basically grandfathering those 2 sites with their asphalt and batching. So does the Lafarge on the other fall under M1 with their plant down in United Boulevard, or?
Yes, that's correct. They would be in M1 zone.
M1 zone.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to distinguish when I read the reports, but I'm glad it's going out for consultation. I think there'll be some concerns, but I think overall, I think the whole industry is going to be, I think, supportive, I hope. I think this is something that businesses had called for in that group years ago, as Craig and I were there. It was something they strongly recommended to help move Coquitlam forward. So I'm waiting to see the stuff. Thank you.
Councilor Wilson.
Thanks. My question was about consultation. We don't seem to get great feedback when we do some consultation with residents. I was just wondering, is it better when it comes to businesses? Feedback you get, response rate?
You get 3 instead of 2. Yeah.
That's a good question too, and certainly we have our economic development manager on our team helping with that, and he has a lot of contacts. He's built up a lot of contacts with the business community there, and I think it just struck me. I'd point to when we went through the King Edward overpass construction period. Because remember, there's limited access to that area for quite a period of time. There was a lot of upfront consultation with the business community down there, inform them, keep them updated. So I think there's probably some channels of communication that have been established in recent years that we can sort of pick up on.
Well, and if I'm correct for that, you had a sort of a town hall meeting with the businesses in the area? Yeah. We were joking that maybe this letter could be sent out with David's Christmas cards that he sends to the businesses, but I guess I would like us as much as possible to be as more effective, I guess, in our consultation. And so, I think a letter is great, but I think, you jokingly said 348 doors to knock on or something. Well, I think it'd be great if we had the ability to actually go to people. I know it might be expensive, but just sending a letter out and giving people the opportunity to provide feedback. I mean, everybody's busy, and so I guess I'm just hoping that our consultation might be a little deeper than just letters. There was an open house or town hall.
If I may, through the chair, just in respect to some of the properties that are going to be changing from industrial to service commercial, they will be getting a phone call.
Okay.
We will be making sure that we contact them. Those that we consider to have a significant impact or a big change will be getting a phone call, not just a letter, because we want to make sure we can find a way to contact and communicate with them.
Yeah, great, because in the consultation, I don't think I read that, because I just wanted to make sure that it was a little deeper. Sorry?
It wasn't in there.
Okay.
What number will you be blessing us with?
Through the chair, one of the things, or two things that we'll try to do to expand the consultation process as far as getting feedback to us, we'll be using the Chamber of Commerce. So the Chamber of Commerce will be similar to what they did with the business license and revisions, bylaw revisions. They promoted it through their database and did all that. We'll be knocking on some doors as well. Maybe Janice can do a follow-up story on it for us. And then the third thing would be that we'll be using the industrial and commercial realtors that represent this area, and so they have the networks more so probably than we do, and so all the major firms we have connections with, and they'll be getting information on it, so make sure that they can go as well. And I think we'll get more uptake from them because those are the ones that have been bringing this up to us on a persistent basis that we needed to look at doing some changes with those zones.
Awesome. Thanks.
Good. No, we haven't quite. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. Okay, how many marijuana places will there be in Coquitlam? Let's say, how many? 20, 30, 15, 10?
Wow.
Yeah, we don't know that answer yet. We are still thinking about ways to manage the use. We made some suggestions in terms around conditions of use.
How many properties are in that category?
Well,
is that possible?
Again, to be determined, right? It's something that I think we really need to go away and take a hard look at in terms of how to manage it per the direction of some of the other council members. I think it makes a lot of
concern that I have that, you know what, we're stressed with our police department already, and I wouldn't want to have a workload for the police department that is not necessary, because the minute you have a medically marijuana grow operation, doesn't mean to say there's some angel in there watching this marijuana grow. You shall grow 6 plants and can't grow anymore. You start growing 200, 300 and have a factory going out the back door. Okay, those are things that are concerned. Secondly, non-conforming. Have you ever thought of this? That, let's say I own a business. All of a sudden you make it non-conforming. I want to sell it. Okay, I want to retire. I can't, because you know why? Nobody will buy a non-conforming business. Have you thought about that? No. Nobody's never thought about this around this table.
We just talked about it. We did.
No, you know what? You own a non-conforming business, and you want to sell it? Somebody's going to buy a non-conforming business. They'll give you 50 cents on the dollar, because it's non-conforming. So right away they know when it's non-conforming. And unless it burns
We've
down,
had
you
a
can rebuild the same
extensive
place all
discussion on
over
that
again,
subject.
but you cannot do anything else with it. So the fact is, what you're doing is tying the hands of people that have conforming businesses now. They're going to be non-conforming, and they won't be able to sell it. That's very simple. You're not going to buy a non-conforming business use because the bank will not going to give you the money for it. You know that. Very simple. And that's my concern, so I'm not going to be supporting this.
I'm going to have to tell some of my clients who've got bank loans for non-conforming buildings that they can't.
Did you not mention that if it was, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Actually,
If as long as there was not a 6-month break in the operation of the
That's right.
business?
Grandfather.
Yes, grandfather.
Through the chair, that's correct. 'Cause we too are concerned about placing people into a non-conforming status. It's headaches all around. So that's why we tried to do the best fit, and there's various approaches we can use to deal with that. At the end of the day, they would have the non-conforming status as per the legislation that allows for that, to carry on an ongoing basis, as long as there's not a break in business operations for 6 months or more.
And if by chance
Wouldn't
there's...
this plan reduce the number of non-conforming?
Yes.
Well, it goes by attrition.
You're not really getting the message what I'm trying to tell you.
No, we're not.
Nobody will buy a non-conforming business.
Well, they buy them all the time.
Buy them all the time. Which ones? Tell me.
Well, I can give you a couple of names of clients, but I couldn't do it here, actually.
The other aspect of this initiative, again, remember that by taking 9 zones and consolidating it down to 3, you're expanding the range of uses. The range of use before might have been this, in that zone, this.
And now you've opened it up.
So what that means for the property owner, the landlord, is that greater range of tenants, greater range of prospective buyers. And so, if anything, it's building value into the properties. Where there's non-conformity, and that's why we want to talk with the property owners. We want to, find out their particular situation, and we're not going to ramrod something if it's not going to work for them.
It's not going to work
Okay.
for them. I'll tell you right now.
If some, yeah, I'm the last speaker. Actually, and myself and Councillor Nicholson, he just pulled himself off the list because he knows how passionate you are about moving forward. He wants to nip this in the bud, weed it out. And I had a couple of questions. I had a couple of questions. How many properties would be currently conforming and following this will become non-conforming? But by and large, most often it would be taking a property that's currently non-conforming and making it conforming,
Yes.
rather than the reverse.
That's right.
City manager did make a cogent point there that there are some uses that currently aren't permitted that are operating in some of these zones. Well, using the best fit approach, they will be permitted uses. A lot of the uses along Barnett Highway on the south side are a perfect example of that.
So one of the perhaps unintended consequences, but it's one of the consequences that will result out of this is fewer non-conforming
Potentially.
properties.
But what the number is, don't know.
Okay, and that's fine. I really like these analyses because they point out weird things, and I'm trying to figure these things out. Like there's an FO6 on attachment 3. So go to attachment 3, FO6. It's the one that looks like this. It's the bottom of Choco.
Which page is it? At the bottom right-hand corner, there's a page number. Page
Bottom right-hand corner, so
10
you're looking for FO6. So that's 14 of 17.
14.
Got it?
And the road allowance, which was Como Lake, is zoned M2. Part of it, I guess, is, I don't know what that is. How do we fix those?
Great question. A lot of cases we do this through this kind of process where we catch these things looking at the mapping and we realize that, for example, in this case, this is a hydro line.
Yes.
Right? So the south portion of that hydro line is currently zoned M2, but the north portion is zoned RM2. So I would call this housekeeping aspect of what we're doing and zoning the entire portion of the hydro facility M1.
And when we used to do complete reviews of documents, we find that housekeeping list, and I assume you're developing the housekeeping list?
Yep.
If you go forward 2 more pages to 16 of 17, there's an M4 somewhere along Pipeline that's just past, well, it's probably just past Mr. Dick's property, I guess, or Just past the Gillette, anyway.
You found our other housekeeping site.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly what that is. This is a piece of property that was, for whatever reason, 20 years ago, was given an M4 zoning. The uses on that site are all A3 uses. So we are going in and giving it its proper zoning, which is the
Okay.
A3 zone.
Good. No, I was hoping that that was the answer. I expected that was going to be the answer. This is a great bunch of work. I think it's going to result in fewer non-conforming uses and a whole bunch more flexibility for all of the uses that we have in our industrial zones. I thank you very much. Outstanding.
Special thanks, Erica.
Special thanks, Eric. Yes. It's good stuff. It gets me fired up. I light up when I see it.
What a nerd.
I can smell the smoke from here.
Okay, enough puns.
Just high.
I'm just high.
We want to work some more artificial grass here.
Do we need to have a vote on receiving?
We can. We don't normally.
Okay, so speaking of grass.
So on the floor already, all in favor of receipt? Opposed? Sorry?
I'm opposed.
You're opposed to receiving it?
Yeah.
You debated more than, okay,
I
good,
did.
okay.
I debated it.
Yep, good.
Good enough.
Okay.
Item 5 is reported back to the General Manager, Parks, Recreation, and Culture.
Now we're talking about artificial grass.
Artificial.
Strategic initiatives related to town such a park, Northfield synthetic turf.
Move received.
Second.
Oh, God.
Mr. Galloway.
Your Worship, Council, just some opening comments. This is actually follows from the Council's approval of the sports field strategy and the program that's been approved, both with financial support and support through the sports users. This is one of the top priorities for Park, Recreation, and Culture and strategic initiatives. And Maurice and Ravel and myself are here. We have our staff, our respective project managers here. If there's any questions, Andre Azikov and Brent Cormack. We're working very closely together, both from the design perspective all the way through to procurement completion. We are targeting fall 2014 for completion of this project. We're just touching base with Council. We are going to be, it is a major project. And so we are making sure Council is aware of the major steps here. We are going to be consulting with the sport users in an open house. We've got one session with stakeholders, I believe, in about a week, which includes football, soccer, rugby, baseball, field lacrosse, field hockey, all the major sports field users. We also have a public open house that will follow, and we'll return back to Council with some results of that. So this is just a status report. Answer any questions you might have. We are proceeding full steam ahead if we get Council support.
Okay. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing, a lot of, comments out in the sports community. They're very happy to see the sports field strategy move ahead, and certainly this was that priority that came out of that. The one thing I am hearing is the timing. I mean, it always sort of been hoped that this would be up and running for early September because that's the start of soccer season. I'm just wondering that the time frame, is this realistic? Can we tighten it up? Is there any way, instead of having an October opening, that we can aim for the start of soccer season? And the other reason being is because doing artificial turf fields, weather is a factor in construction, and we obviously want to make sure we're doing it while we have the good weather and that we don't get stuck with a rainy September and have the whole thing go into the mud.
No question. Actually, we've had some really very, very intense meetings internally about the project delivery. We are actually, both our departments are working very closely together to be able to order the material in advance, complete some of the design and procurement kind of on cross, so there's actually the project is proceeding to try and complete it for the September timeline. That's absolutely the goal. We do, and we've had many intense discussions around this project delivery in the fall. Make sure we're open for that season. We're making best efforts to do that. And we're running ahead to the stakeholder sessions, one next week, public open house as soon as possible, finalize it in January, and then move ahead with, we've already got the consultant, which is Vanderzam. I think they've got Binny as their consultant as well, as they're part of their project team. So we've got them all ready, and we're moving ahead. So we're very much aware of that timeline. That's what we're targeting.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing as Craig did as far as the season. Now, we seem to be doing a lot of things in our parks and recreation in the season when it's being used rather than when it's not being used. So I'm delighted about that. How often do we change replace the artificial turf? How many years usually? Because I thought that we replaced the one at Charles Bass just about a year ago, 2 years ago. Or was it patch job?
It's about 10 to 15 years is a full.
Okay, so Charles Bass was a patch job, was it?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's all I wanted. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. I know I've been at the meeting. CFSA has documented this as their number one priority. These consultants are different than the ones that we had at Town Centre.
They're different.
Thank you. And I was going to ask the same thing because we've had issues in the past about the ceiling into Lake October causing problems with the project. So I'm glad Councillor Hodge brought that up. But I guess the one issue that's going to come out of this is the ability to, with those 2 new fields coming in, to be national and international tournaments and be, for the Celebrate Coquitlam Committee, a greater draw. So thank you.
That was it? Okay. Councillor Cirillo.
So my questions in the report are a little bit around budget, but I'm not sure what I can ask, and we're open, right?
Yeah, we're open. Yes. Thank you.
So
thank you for tempering your comments.
yeah, so I guess my question then would just be about budgeting. I understand from this report it's about the turf conversion project, but I see in the report that we're talking about washroom facilities that weren't initially in scope. So I'm just wondering if the $2.5 million is incorporating any additional amenities that might come on.
Your Worship, no, they are not. There are some basic elements of project planning. For instance, there may be washrooms long-term, but we don't know. It's out of scope at the moment. But there are some site preparation that we would set up to make sure that we don't have a problem if we ever had to put them in. But those are basically part of the project itself. There are no, there's no expectation we could fit in the bathrooms within. It's about a $200,000 to $300,000 item, and it's not in scope.
So this $2.5 million, you will be sticking, or we as a city will be sticking to this $2.5 million, and this $2.5 million is 100% in the conversion. Sorry, through the terms there, through the conversion to these turfs.
It is the full project cost for the conversion of this field to an artificial turf field.
Okay, and then just one last question about on the colored document that we had. Under 2013, it said to reconfigure underused ball diamonds for casual use. What does that mean?
2013?
Yeah, on the, there's a little, yeah.
Ottawa Humane Society. Oh, not in the timeline, but in the operational project.
There was a study last year showing that the baseball was a declining sport, not an increasing sport, and so that recognized that some baseball fields may be turned into some alternate use. That's right.
So I did read that in the report. So we talked. This is 2 fields, 1 soccer, 1 baseball.
Yes, there's actually two diamonds in the field. But it's also used for soccer. So there's 2. You'll see there's 2. You'll see it on the actual attachment too.
So what does it mean though to reconfigure underused ball diamonds for casual use? We're still going to go ahead and turf the ball diamonds even though they're not being
Whole field,
used.
it's all being turfed.
And so how would there be a difference for casual use versus not casual use if it's all already turfed?
I think it's the difference between a purpose-built field, which is actually specifically built for that, as opposed to just a casual, pickup sport. Andre, is there any particular elements of this
That's
I
a generic.
highlight?
That's from the main report,
Yeah.
not specific to this.
Yeah,
This is So this is actually comes out of the actual sports field strategy. There's a lot of detail in there.
Footnote from
There's a footnote from
Your Worship, through the chair, the vision for the whole project is to have a field that's as flexible as possible. So in the baseball season, it will allow the baseball users to utilize the 2 baseball fields on both sides of the field. And in soccer season, you'd be able to remove the bases and to remove, even though the entire field is turf, you'd be able to actually remove the bases and the pitch and to utilize the field for soccer.
Okay.
which could be one sort of standard size soccer field or 2 Super 8 soccer fields. So
Or practice.
Yeah, practice fields. So the idea is to allow for that flexibility.
And the Super 8s, I mean, the council's aware of the Super 8 size for younger
Yeah.
youth sport. The other part is the baseball users are in our consultation program. They're part of our stakeholders, so they'll be involved as well.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's more just, to be keeping to our budget of 2.5 million
Yes.
for the turf.
That's Maurice's job.
He's keeping me in task, that's for sure.
He built
How many changers do we? Councilor Nicholson.
Thank you. Well, anytime you want to talk about public washrooms, I'm doing that.
There's your man.
So I think that point's being made, we're not getting them yet. We can talk about them later. No, what I was looking at was, so this comes out of the sports field strategy, which was the product of extensive public consultation, lots of work, really great piece of work. And then we're talking about public engagement and concept development. And we've had a ton of public engagement. And concept development, to me, the concept is pretty simple, right? We're going to take away the grass and replace it with turf.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what public engagement and concept development is going to add to the value of the whole process, aside from a couple of months.
Hear about the showers earlier.
This is it's a major project. I mean, this is $2.5 million, and we just want to make sure that we are, and we believe this is going to be very, very quick. It's just a touch base with these organizations, again, let them know what we're doing. But a project of this size, we feel it's just good courtesy to go back and let them know what we're doing and get some final commentary from them if there's anything we haven't picked up in the concept.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Rasmussen, Councilor Howard.
I guess my comment would be that this should be really just straight through the CFSA as the group there. And I think with the consultation you want is a little more refinement on the lining and use that will happen within it, because the issue is about, you can only have about 3 lines, how they want it done, how they want. So it's just, you're just trying to refine some of the details, but you'll be going strictly not to each individual group, but through the CFSA for that consultation.
Yeah, it is exactly right. I mean, the representatives that we're bringing into the stakeholder session are effectively the sports users minus the track and field. It is about the lining, what lining patterns we're going to have for utilizing these.
But
So
I
it is
guess
that detail.
my comment would be that it should be really through the CFSA to direct that, because because if you go to like calling a session to ask people from the associations to come in and comment, and then go back to CFSA, you may get off track there, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So it should really go to the CFSA as a special meeting for them to meet and discuss, because they're the ones that are behind this. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, Councilor Howard.
I agree. I think we want to just keep it tight, keep the project moving. I was going to raise lining because that's was my immediate thought when it comes to consultation. I mean, we know what we're building. Maybe some differences about lining. I know that nets and how we're going to have portable nets, building nets. So I think there's some issues around nets. But those are the technical things. I think that those are the things that we can work out as the project goes. But there's certainly things we want to discuss in advance so that everybody's on the same page.
No, there's probably other items to discuss as well, like how much rebar is this, Maurice?
He's expanding his portfolio.
To the chair, just as part of the consultation process, we can also advise the user groups what impacts they'll see during construction. We're going to have to cone off some areas for construction, for storage, and things like that. So it might have some minor impacts on the parking and some of the pathways, so we can share that with the user groups, just so they know what's coming down the tubes. Because it is a substantial size project. As Raul said, we've had a number of meetings already, how we can fast track it. We're going to pre-order the material. There's probably 3 or 4 other municipalities that are doing the same type of project. We want to get our order in, and first in, you get usually pretty good pricing. So we're going to do everything we can in that regard, albeit it's a big job, and we'll work through all the issues, and hopefully we can deliver it in the very early fall.
Anybody else? Is there a motion yet? All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Glad you moved to planning.
Next one.
A little bit easier than the zone.
Yeah. Pass that one up.
Chicken.
How many non-conforming uses can you find for a artificial turf field?
Item 6 is report of General Manager, Engineering and Public Works related to 2013 Water Conservation Program Summary.
Recommendation.
Second.
Good, a report that doesn't need any debate.
Yeah.
Just a question.
Do you have a sprinkling of knowledge?
Councillor Crown.
Dry up.
Councillor Nicholson, Councillor O'Neill.
No, if you go to O'Neill first, then I have time to think.
That's exactly
Do you have a report at all? Do you have anything you wanted to say? Was there some shortcoming in your...
Your Worship, the report is self-explanatory.
Yes.
The program has been going on for years. It's been working well, and we are committed to report back to you sometime next year with an update of how, if at all, we should change the current program.
So, Your Worship,
Councillors, please
my,
start the debate.
under the exact summary, we say enforcement of the water shortage response plan bylaw resulted in 53 verbal warnings, 371 written warnings, and 8 fines of $75. Wow, we're pretty lenient. So I'm just curious as to what criteria are applied in deciding when you see my neighbor sprinkling his lawn at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Some get spoken to, some get something in writing, and very, very few get fined. Do we know what criteria are used in deciding what level of intervention?
Through your Worship, the general idea is that we can achieve better results if we educate the public. So before we would consider issuing any kind of ticket, we make the best of our attempts to educate them, and we issue tickets, generally speaking, only in instances where our reoccurring attempts didn't result in what we would like to achieve.
That's correct, and I would just add, because of the long history of the program, we have a very lengthy database of actions we've taken in previous years and where we have repeat occurrences, and so in the field we just use discretion and common sense in applying the spectrum of compliance and enforcement tools that we have available.
Okay. Is that database available to the people in the field? If I'm one of your summer workers out either responding to complaints or perhaps just cruising neighborhoods,
yes, all of
if I see an offense, do I have the ability to know whether it's a repeat?
Yes, all of the information is available. There's the opportunity to, if they have the laptop or whatever at their disposal at the time, they can look the information up, or they can phone back to somebody at City Hall, or there's also the option to provide the warning, ask for the sprinkler or whatever it is to be turned off, and then come back and do a more fulsome evaluation of that address to see whether or not there's a history that warrants a higher degree of compliance enforcement.
So I guess what I would read into 8 $75 fines is that there's a great deal of compliance after a little bit of education.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill?
Yeah, thanks. And I thought that some statement had been made in months previous about reviewing this program, and you just confirmed it, and I was particularly interested in the toilet rebate, but whether or not that's actually just coincidental now, or it's actually causing, sparking people to go and buy water-efficient toilets, or whether people are replacing toilets anyway, and they see there's something they can take advantage of and get $100 out of it. So that's the issue I have. You'll have to look into that, I guess, in the next few months.
And it is something that we started monitoring actually a year ago and considering. And there have been updates recently to the building code that does require the use of higher efficient toilets. So there is the balance there, and it is something we need to evaluate.
Right. I would think that maybe it's something that we could put on the SDL. Stop doing this. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think I got anybody else. Anybody else?
Gosh, I'm voting on this.
All in favor? Opposed?
takes a long time. Parks got through quick, engineering got through quick. Shoot.
I'm wondering which item you're here for. All of the above. Okay, there you go.
I'm here for item number 4, and I just want to know if I can ask a question after this meeting is over, or if I have to wait until after the meeting.
There might be a third option, even further into the future.
Come back tomorrow.
We'll probably still be here at the
Well, your best bet might be to ask the question after we adjourn, because there isn't a process for a question period after this meeting, but there is a 5-minute break. And so.
I don't need an answer. I could probably answer it myself.
Well, why are you here? Why are you here?
He wants to make a story.
Okay, OB1.
OB1.
One is engagement with provincial government regarding the local elections campaign financing, and this is brought up by Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, on November 15th, the provincial government issued a press release that I forwarded to all of you guys, saying that it's starting a phase of consultation regarding, they decided, the first phase was, they decided there are going to be election expense limits for 2014, or I can't remember the date, anyway. But the second phase is figuring out what sort of expense limits there are. And as part of that, they said in their press release, the minister will also write to all local governments and the British Columbia School Trustees Association to invite their feedback, and will publish a short discussion paper online to invite public input until January 31st, 2014. Now, I want to know if we've received this letter, and if we've received this letter inviting public, inviting our feedback, whether this is going to be an actual council discussion, whether the clerk is going to take the initiative on this and come to us, or how this is going to be handled. It's an important subject for all of us, obviously, election expenses, or whether we should, just take individual initiative. But even without that, there's nothing stopping us from taking individual initiative. But there is apparently a formal letter coming from the minister to us as a local government asking for feedback. So I want to know what that process will be. If you,
okay. And I'm wondering, I'm curious as heck as to what this letter will be like, because I don't know that we as a city, as an entity, have an interest in this. So I don't know if we as a city can develop a policy related to it. And I know that both of our clerk and deputy city clerk have passionate interest in not being at all involved in this, I suspect. Ms. Lord.
So we haven't received a letter as of yet. I did go on the website today to see sort of where it was at, and there was no information there. They were supposed to start phase consultation in November, but I haven't seen anything as of yet related to that. The second phase is related specifically to limits on campaign expenses,
right,
which is primarily a political matter. So council may wish, if you would like to respond to that collectively, to form a working group such as Richmond has done with some technical input from staff, if you're wanting to respond as a collective as opposed to individually.
I would concur. I think I thought Richmond came up with a good solution. They've used this process throughout the work that the province has done, and I think they found it worked well for them. It's hard to see it as a matter of city or staff policy, as opposed to one that is of political interest or interest to residents, right? I shouldn't put it in the political sphere. It's all of those who are interested in the election process.
so this working group is a working group of councillors and staff, did you say?
It was a working group of councillors with, I think, limited to staff secretarial support is what they did. I can share that with you.
Do you know if that precludes individual councillors making responses as well?
I can't imagine you could fetter it.
Okay.
Yes.
So council could pass a resolution 5-4 saying something, and then the minority can go and do everything they want, or we can just go and do on our own whatever we want anyway. if we don't have a joint thing.
I mean, I guess my first thought is this something that you believe should be a vote that takes place on the council floor? Is it something that council, speaking on behalf of all of us, citizens of Coquitlam, want to establish a city of Coquitlam position?
Should see what it's all about first.
Yeah, okay, good. We can express opinions on that now, but I was just...
Or we can wait
not.
till we get the letter.
Yeah, we can do that later. We can wait for the letter, absolutely. And I just wanted to start engaging discussion about this because apparently we are going to be engaged.
Okay. Let's not spend too much time on this one because we actually have some city business here, but this one's more provincial. I agree. It relates to us, but it doesn't relate to the city. Yes, is my. I understand where you come from, Councilor Nicholson.
But I just wanted to tell you that the UBCM exec met a week after that press release, and it was not on the agenda at all, or discussed around the coffee table.
Okay.
So it's not going anywhere.
Sure.
I guess the provincial government can legislate it, say this is going to be the way you're going to expense. I think that we should get involved in making comments on expenses. I hear a lot of crazy things out on the street, and I think the greatest thing you hear. You take money from developers. You take money from unions. You take money from you know what? I've heard enough of that crap. I think we should get together and either say no, we're not going to take any money from these people, and that's the way it should be, or whatever. But I think that it should come to head because I'll tell you, you hear that. I even had one candidate say to me, "You take money from a developer. How can you refuse their rezoning? That's a fact." I said, "I'm not for sale." Very, very simple. You know what? That's a fact. I had one candidate tell me, how do you refuse a rezoning after you've taken money from the candidate, after the developer?
Give enough.
Hello?
Yeah, I agree. Anybody else on this?
No.
Thank you. Let's go.
Second other business item relates to Multi-Materials British Columbia Multifamily Collection Services. I believe Councillor Hodge.
Mine was OB3, which is the green one.
Well, this one was mine, it's okay. And I really just wanted to raise this. It's my understood. I have not been able to find anything anywhere that tells me that MMBC is taking any action with regard to providing the service to multifamilies that they're mandated to provide. As far as I can make out, the only thing is that it is in their plan. But there's
what do we call up our MMBC?
Yes, I'm looking for someone who knows more about this.
Call up our MMBC expert.
There she is.
I did hear Rick Clough talk to
It's not till next
Langdon
July
this
anyway,
morning.
Yeah, in other words, they're almost out of time.
Yeah, Rick Clough interviewed Alan Langdon this morning, and it was, I think that is a wonderful thing.
That's a great thing. Yes. Do you want to answer a question, or did you perceive a question?
Do you have any knowledge of any attempt by MMBC to serve the multifamily component in our municipality or any other?
So what we know is that as of that September 16th timeframe, that MMBC put out their offer for the collection from curbside, which we dealt with, multifamily as well. That was open to any respondent. So through that process, the intention was to retain collectors for our multifamily dwellings in Coquitlam and
That's
elsewhere.
for them
and
to,
elsewhere,
for them
MMBC.
to.
It is their requirement under the provincial jurisdiction to deliver that program. Under the provincial program, they're required by middle of May. However, in Coquitlam, there's been an agreement that it would coincide with the
contract rollover
of June 30th. So I do not have the specific details about who they have retained or the ultimate success of them fulfilling their provincial requirement, other than it is mandated by the province that they must carry that out.
So be if I may well have bid, and may have been a successful bidder in a process that we're not privy to.
Well, there wasn't a bidding process for multifamily. So it was slightly different than the curbside, where the curbside, single-family curbside collection at that September 16th deadline, and the incentive that was offered at that time was strictly open to municipalities. But the multifamily and recycling depot services were open to any qualified collectors. So as a municipality, we could have accepted, but others could have also. So in Coquitlam's case, as you're aware, we chose not to accept, but what other players out there may have accepted is knowledge that MMBC currently has.
Okay, and the strata property manager that I've spoken to, I had to explain to them what MMBC was. So they don't, they're not being approached. To me, this is potentially an issue for a lot of people who live in our city and a lot of other cities in the province.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for raising it, because this is a public relations issue as much as more than it is a jurisdiction issue. It is very clear as who is responsible. MMBC is responsible. Do we have a high degree of comfort that they will provide that service in a very effective and problem-free manner? We do not have a high degree of confidence that that will happen, but it still remains their responsibility. So the most we can do is ask for clarification from them as to what their plan is. And
stewards for our residents.
Yes.
I think we should ask that question.
Yes. Well,
But in the absence of evidence to the contrary, we have to assume they're kind of going forward with a program that starts July, well, actually starts on multifamily because we weren't in that.
In our case, the multifamily would still
apply to
they
July
have
1st.
committed that we do not need to, that we would not be required to break any existing contracts. And so under our existing contract with Smith Wright, we pick up approximately 80% of the multifamily recyclable.
Get a month and a half.
So on July 1st, they need to have something in place.
Yes.
So I guess another question is, have we said anything to those 80%? Have we said, you realize that our contract expires June the 30th and somebody else is responsible after that?
We have not provided that direct communication yet to our current customers. We are looking to do something early in 2014, but we are waiting a little bit for some of these unanswered questions to be answered, so we have something that we can share to assist with that transition.
I'm not sure.
One of the things that that your query prompted us to look into is the details of our budget and what we charge, and that wasn't discussed in great detail as part of our budget discussions. But in terms of finalizing the report that you will see tonight, you will see that we are dropping the charge to multifamily in half. For half the year, we're going to be providing service. The other half, it won't be. And once we pass that, it would seem to me to be an appropriate correspondence to, do you note that we're only charging you half? That's because we're only giving you service for half the year. And that probably would be good communique to send out from Coquitlam's perspective to all of those as part of our communication program. We have talked about the need to develop a very robust communication program, and we're in the process of developing that. And come the new year, I think we'll see lots of need for publicity like that. So thank you for raising it. If council wants us to do something now, we can certainly do something, but we were planning to do something very early in the year in that regard.
You good? Thank you. Anybody else? Green waste.
Okay, so my recollection on the contract is that in terms of green waste, we have the additional yard pickup for 8 weeks. Is it 8 weeks total that we have that we're looking at in the contract? 4, and I'm presuming that's 4 in the spring and 4 in the fall?
That's correct.
So thinking about that as I'm raking my leaves in early September or end of September and the middle of October, And then last week, when the rest of the leaves came down, and talking about the communication program and the difficulty communicating to the trees that they have to drop all their leaves in a 4-week period, just wondering if we have a plan to deal with that, because I can just see our phones ringing about the 1st of November next year, at a time that we're busy doing other things, with people complaining that the leaves are still piling up in their yard and that the 4 weeks of green waste pickup has ended. Have we thought of going to every second week and
4
having
weeks
it
of
unlimited?
expanded.
Or 4 weeks, yeah.
There's a minimum.
So can we expand in advance, or is this going to be done on a week by week? Can we just sort of say, hey, we're going to need it again next week? I mean, this is all weather dependent as well.
Through your worship, at this point, what we are planning on is to closely monitor the weather and adjust that 4-week period when it's really needed the most. Now, there will be events when the 4 weeks will not be adequate, at which point we have options. One option is to extend the 4-week period by 1 or 2 more weeks, as council wish. Alternatively, we are still picking up 1 can per residence. And alternatively, the residents can actually collect the green leaves and take themselves down to the transfer station and drop it off at no charge. Now, obviously, if we were to extend the 4-week period as weather dictates, and it's truly necessary, we will be facing some additional costs, but that's probably something we could consider.
I know it's an option. I have a rather large yard and a rather small car, so I don't know if that's really going to be an option for me. I'm just concerned that, you know, that residents are going to expect that it's a 4-week period, and I think going in, that's not realistic. We may not need 8, but I can't see all the leaves being down and raked in a 4-week period, and whether or not we should make that decision ahead of time and just say 4 weeks isn't going to be enough.
Wait and see.
Or maybe we
I don't
could,
know, we can make the change on the fly.
Well, then buy a goat.
or we talk about variable rates for garbage collection, perhaps there could be a separate rate for large lots.
Small cars.
That's reflected in my property tax, your worship.
On no free streets.
Lou?
Yeah, thank you. I think that Craig is correct. The fact is that, you know what, we have a 4-week period in the spring, 4-week in the fall. You know, the weather, you know, we have to adjust to the weather. And what happens if you need bigger, longer pickups? And you say, well, we can adjust. You can't adjust at a minute or a moment. You have to adjust period for a few years. You cannot adjust as you feel the city hall can adjust, because the public out there doesn't get the message from the city hall. Snap just like that. You know what you're doing, but the general public doesn't know what you're doing. So the fact is, you either set the rates or the range that you're going to pick up in the spring and the fall now, before the contract kicks in, or because I can tell you something. Craig is correct. The fact is, you know what, you got 4 weeks in the spring, 4 weeks in the fall, guarantee our phones will be ringing off our hook.
Yeah, Gary.
Yes, thanks. I just wanted, it's an issue that I've been thinking about just personally, and I know it has wider application. So I was thinking if there's not much flexibility in this 4 weeks, what would I do with the 3 bags of leaves and cuttings that I put out this morning that got picked up? Because we're probably outside of the 3 weeks that you would have thought of normally. And I knew that I'd be able to take them in my SUV for free. But I also thought, well, okay, I could probably just sort of cover all the bases by asking for the largest possible green bin, and have a big green bin that hardly gets filled up for most of the year. But then for the rest, but then for those times that I could put, what's the largest, put leaves in there. And that's going to be okay, right? Using the green bin for the leaves and garden cuttings, right? And am I allowed to have 2 green bins and pay extra for that, or how did that work? I forget. I know that was all gone over, and I forgot the answer.
Yes, that's true. There's a variety of sizes, so as a city will provide a base size, but residents have the option to downsize or upsize at their choosing. And then on top of that, in terms of our green waste, so it's not just yard trimmings, that's our whole organic suite, so the food scraps, etc. We're not proposing to limit the volume as a city, will provide the one bin, but if you know in advance that you're going to need more than that, then as a resident, you have the option to purchase additional bins.
So if I get the one largest size green bin, if I want to upsize, is that going to, do I pay extra money to get, do I have to pay extra to get that larger bin than the standard size that that the city will provide? Or on the first iteration here, I can just choose any and I get any one of them for the same amount of money,
Well,
which is free to the taxpayer.
we're still working out those details, so we still have to go to the RFP for the bins and work out all of that costing and how that's all going to roll out. But it's likely there would be a small fee increase for if you wanted the larger bin.
And then.
But it would be very.
Okay, and then extra, a couple $100 to buy a whole extra bin to have if I wanted to, right?
Wanted to.
So it probably wouldn't get used an awful lot, but those are possibilities, yeah. But maybe getting the bigger bin might be the way to go. Okay, thank you.
We're still contemplating a calendar that describes pickup days for the various neighborhoods, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. We'll
Okay.
maintain our collection calendar.
So if we've got a collection calendar, could we not pick the 4 weeks that are going to be extra, that you can put out bags of leaves as October 1st, the October 15th week, the November 1st week, and the December 1st week? Could those be the 4 weeks? And put them in the calendar?
Yeah.
So it's every second week or whatever. So you end up with one big cleanup on December 1st that allows you those straggler leaves.
I guess you could, yes. Store the leaves, yeah. I guess you could.
I mean, if you put them in the bag and you put them next to your garage, the bears aren't coming after them, it just leaves. And you drag them out at the end of the month.
Make sure they don't get wet.
Clean up week.
Yeah.
We will be certain to advertise well in advance when those pickup times will be, certainly.
Because I think it would be a bit wasteful to have them 4 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Because that's not when we need them. We need them every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. Benita.
Just very quickly, I've been in 2 municipalities where they are limited in when you can do your waste. Like, there must be best practices that we're looking at. I know Etobicoke for sure, probably Vancouver that of
Let's find out
for their yard.
kind of how other municipalities do it.
Oh, sorry, I see. Certainly, and there's other municipalities that have the automated. There are other municipalities that have the automated collection, and exactly they would be facing the same situation, and not all of them offer that unlimited or even extra pickups that we're proposing to help bridge that gap.
In Etobicoke, you can't even put your lawn clippings in the green bin. So I think we need to take a look at other municipalities on this, because they've already got the solution. They've been running it for many, many years, and can maybe help us fast track how to do this. Because I think I've expressed before, I'm worried about the small, medium, and large options, but I'm sure it'll come back to us at a different time.
Yeah, and finally, there's lots of gardeners that will suggest you take the leaves and do this with them or whatever, or composting and stuff. So there's lots of other options that we may want to put before people. But if we've given it enough thought and we've advertised a schedule that's somewhat reasonable, and I don't think it'll be the issue, but we don't do that, yeah, it'll be an issue. Okay. Anybody else on that one? Okay. Sorry, I have one more. That's it. Wait. I had added before the transit question.
The transit question.
That Sandy passed out? Oh, if we wanted to deal with it.
Oh, in case anyone wanted to move.
We've got a huge in-camera agenda to deal with in 1 hour.
I'm just saying. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Suggest we put it on OB next week.
Yep. Good. Done.
5 minutes.
To adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Favor.
Where's the chicken and the bees? Where's the chicken and the bees?
All in favor? Opposed?
Chicken and the
Carried.
birds and the bees?
Thank you very much. We're going to take an 8-minute break.